You contemplating such matters? You should focus on designing your vassal civilization instead. Oh dear, a minor mishap has arisen, and I am currently addressing it. But fret not, it will be resolved shortly. The transmission was interrupted for a moment before Grey Wind resumed. As for this crisis, can it truly be deemed a crisis? Admittedly, it is somewhat feeble, yet there seem to be many secrets involved. If time permits, I would love to experience it firsthand. Perhaps next time, if there is one. While I suspect it is mostly related to humanity, observing the advancements of galactic civilizations is quite enlightening. After engaging in trivial chatter with Grey Wind, the communication fell silent once more. Li Wenyuan then turned his attention to the Starsea community, particularly the remarkably active Lost Empire. They are now called the Benevolent Embracers. The previous Lost Empires had numerous tales. What might this one have in store? Chapter 140. The invasion of the deceased. Research regarding the resurrection of the deceased is not uncommon within the galaxy. Long before civilizations reach for the stars, death and the afterlife have always been profound subjects for contemplation. There are aging emperors, fearful of death, dispatching emissaries to seek elixirs of immortality or arranging for sacrificial burials to maintain their supreme status in the afterlife. Then there are the mad genius scientists, stitching together corpses to save their beloved, ultimately creating distorted beings that may or may not qualify as life. Even in the interstellar age, literary creations concerning death abound, with masters periodically garnering the prestigious Galactic Scroll Award through their contemplations on mortality. Beyond philosophical musings, scientific inquiries into death have never ceased. Some cosmic enterprises have developed unique insights into posthumous employment to maximize the utility of their workforce, though these revelations remain undisclosed. Meanwhile, idealistic civilizations have cultivated a fervent interest in death, giving rise to distinctive cults that venerate it. Yet, akin to posthumous employment, they remain a niche within the galaxy. However, the existence of psychic energy in this universe does not imply that the resurrection of the deceased can occur at will. Consequently, when galactic civilizations discovered that the rapidly expanding entities were corpse civilizations, a blend of caution and discourse ensued. In the 13th trade outpost of Karibo, Blaney scrutinized a report delivered by his subordinates, earnestly contemplating this crisis. The footage captured indeed revealed a civilization composed of corpses. The large screen before him displayed a grotesque sight, a space whale carcass hurtling through the vastness of the cosmos. It was undeniably a corpse, as no signs of life could be detected on these celestial leviathans. Nevertheless, these remains exhibited a semblance of activity, as if manipulated by some unseen force. Even in death, the appendages of the corpses swayed rhythmically. If one could disregard the fatal wounds, they might easily be mistaken for living beings. Space whales are a type of interstellar organism that civilizations are almost certain to encounter, drifting through the cosmic expanse and traversing interstellar distances via incomprehensible biochemical reactions. The identity of the individual who first dubbed this creature a space whale remains a mystery, despite the inclusion of whale in its name. Its appearance bears no resemblance to any marine mammal inhabiting a certain blue planet. If one were to draw a comparison, space whales resemble cosmic squids, with their heads morphing into an umbrella-like canopy. These gentle giants, despite their massive size comparable to that of large spacecraft, are unlikely to provoke ire unless threatened. Known behaviors indicate they travel in small familial pods, migrating from one gas giant to another, subsisting on the dense upper atmospheres of these planets. Following the enactment of the Space Whale Protection Act, the hunting of these docile creatures became a prohibited act under interstellar law. Historically, no civilization sought to hunt these beings, which held primarily biological research value. Only inexperienced spacefarers, driven by curiosity, would occasionally capture a few for examination. Space whales were meant to live carefree in such an environment. But everything changed with the emergence of Pressolin. Civilizations have become acutely aware of the relentless obsession of this lost empire, which resembles a hive, over sustenance, and tentatively began to deliver the flesh of space whales. Upon discovering the viability of this arrangement, sufficient incentives compelled these civilizations to embark on the path of hunting space whales. After all, these gentle giants provide ample opportunity for traps to be laid around them. While these celestial beings can exhibit formidable combat prowess when provoked, hunters consistently manage to vanquish the space whales with ease, thanks to their meticulous preparations. Were it not for Pressolin's resolute declaration against the acceptance of sentient corpses, it is conceivable that the slaughter of indigenous beings for accolades might have unfolded in this scenario. Even now, in the era of the Space Whale Protection Act, certain civilizations still dare to take risks for the sake of profit, employing whaling crews disguised as pirates to hunt these majestic creatures. Before Brenning, the images of these space whale carcasses loomed like countless specters, seeking vengeance upon the living. Specters? Within the information Brenning received, there were scant records concerning the civilization controlling these space beings' remains. Nonetheless, minor skirmishes have already emerged in the interstellar realm, and it is likely that the Starsea community will soon issue an official notification. Perhaps I should contemplate seeking refuge at headquarters? He pondered this possibility. Yet his gaze soon returned to the mechanical lost empire depicted on the star map, situated near his trading post. Never mind, I shall remain here. This may indeed be one of the safest locales in the galaxy. In stark contrast to Brenning's leisurely demeanor, the internal workings of the Starseed community appeared to be bustling with activity. Ambassadors from various civilizations congregated at the headquarters within the Triumvirate system, deliberating the situation surrounding these suddenly manifested corpse civilizations. Initially, they presumed that, while peculiar in appearance, these corpse civilizations were fundamentally still civilizations that could be understood through dialogue. However, this notion was swiftly extinguished with the disappearance of the diplomatic envoy sent to engage with the corpse civilizations. Although these entities may indeed be classified as civilizations, it is highly probable that they resemble extermination regimes, even in the absence of direct hostilities. The rapid expansion of these deceased beings and the reactions of benevolent hosts have placed immense pressure on the Starseed community. To what extent have these corpses advanced? Their rate of expansion far exceeds our expectations, and even observation posts struggle to provide timely updates. Fortunately, the shared star maps from benevolent hosts have prevented a greater catastrophe. As discussions unfolded among a group of staff members, the entire known star map of the galaxy was revealed at the center of the conference room. A conspicuous area of perilous red dominated the star map, spreading swiftly like a plague, poised to confront several civilizations shortly. At this moment, this red expanse, likely representing foes, remains unnamed, yet all present comprehend the urgency of the situation. Has the task force dispatched to gather information yielded any results? No, although there have been some minor skirmishes. The relentless onslaught of seemingly endless extraterrestrial beings has left us no time to collect the fallen. Have other civilizations commented on this? No. They too face the same predicament. There is simply no time to pause. Perhaps a decisive victory capable of vanquishing our foes is what we require to embark on our research. Discussions regarding these corpses of civilizations continue. Yet, in truth, the Stellar Commonwealth has yet to acquire any valuable information. Just as the representatives of various civilizations in the conference room were still debating the methods to obtain intelligence on the enemy, a communication from the benevolent refugee reached us. The holographic projection of a representative from the benevolent refugee materialized at the center of the conference room, replacing the star map that once occupied that space. Once the room fell silent, the representative from the Lost Empire spoke. In light of the unprecedented speed of this invasion by the deceased, we shall now share our known intelligence. This is a group of ancient adversaries that we once vanquished, believed to have perished from existence, yet they have returned today. We refer to this realm composed of the dead and corpses as the undead invasion. They will annihilate every civilization in their path, turning vitality into decay. At that time, we were unaware of the magnitude of this threat, and we paid a heavy price. The vast majority of our combatants became part of them, transformed into restless spirits. This experience taught us a crucial lesson. Do not confront them alone, for doing so will only multiply our enemies. We must unite. In those days, we gathered all the survivors in the galaxy and waged a brutal campaign spanning decades in the decisive star system, ultimately driving away these specters. Now, I urge all crisis fighters to relocate their civilizational strongholds to our sanctuary, to forge a bastion against this undead invasion together. Chapter 141, Crisis Fighters? We hope every crisis fighter can set aside their prejudices and past grievances to transfer their civilizational positions to our haven. I understand your skepticism, but I believe you will soon comprehend our intentions. The benevolent refugee will always keep their borders open for you, anticipating the day when we join hands rather than become the purged. With that, the holographic projection of the benevolent refugee dissipated, revealing a galaxy map that appeared to have expanded even further. The representatives from various civilizations exchanged glances, enveloped in silence. Just moments ago, the benevolent refugee had shared their experiences from ancient battles against the undead invasion. Although they were wary of the request to relocate their civilizational strongholds to the domain of this awakened empire, the reputation and trust stemming from the former observers left them in a state of indecision. If, as the benevolent refugees assert, the dead invasion possesses a terrifying capacity for assimilation, then every civilization that falls will become a weapon wielded against its own kind. However, the monumental task of relocating civilizations is one that any society would approach with utmost caution. The benevolent refugees seem to have anticipated the inevitable lack of immediate trust. Hence, they did not hastily compel the galactic civilizations to make a decision, but rather established a deadline for responses, to ensure that the dead invasion does not exploit other civilizations to augment its own strength. We shall execute incineration on those civilizations that do not accept our protection after a designated period. We hope you understand our concerns. You must believe that we are genuinely considering the welfare of all. Such statements, cloaked in the guise of negotiation yet imbued with an underlying threat, compelled numerous civilizations to treat the matter with grave seriousness, urgently verifying whether the spirits indeed possessed the dreadful nature as claimed by the benevolent refugees. However, the rapidly expanding corpse civilization crushed all probing fleets with overwhelming might, yielding no tangible results for these civilizations. Among them was the Stellar Alliance, a venerable interstellar civilization that managed a vast network of stargates. In a bid to protect their stargate network, They engaged in battle with a contingent of advanced fleets from the dead invasion. Ultimately, they suffered a devastating defeat, forced to destroy many stargates on the brink of capture to prevent the dead invasion from utilizing them for further expansion. The sheer number of the undead forces evoked comparisons to a swarm, yet these legions were far more fearsome. The known quantity of the undead forces had even surpassed the total number of the contemporary young civilizations within the galaxy, prompting speculation about the origin of such a multitude of corpses. Some even conjectured that these beings had been hoarding the dead since ancient times. This hypothesis quickly gained traction, further unsettling the resolve of these civilizations to remain anchored to their home planets. If we do not align ourselves with the benevolent refugees, how many civilizations from countless galactic epochs will we face as the dead? Shall we too become part of this Legion of the Fallen? Perhaps only by transcending the barriers of species and consciousness, as proposed by the benevolent refugees, allowing the entirety of the galaxy to coalesce into a singular civilization. Can we endure this dire crisis? Such despairing news spread incessantly among the populace of various civilizations, and despite the efforts of governmental authorities to suppress it, rumors proliferated, leading infiltration agencies to suspect the presence of malefactors stirring the pot behind the scenes. Though the origins and nature of these undead remain shrouded in uncertainty, the terror of the dead invasion has become an undeniable reality. Some civilizations, unable to withstand the mounting pressure within, have chosen to seek refuge among the benevolent refugees. This refuge is a colossal ring world, situated within the domain of the benevolent refugees. Once, observers had settled numerous indigenous civilizations upon its surface. Now, it is the turn of interstellar civilizations to inhabit this sanctuary. A multitude of vessels, laden with countless souls, commenced their journey from various corners of the galaxy towards sanctuaries. While the benevolent hosts diligently erected a multitude of interstellar fortifications along the borders, seemingly preparing for an ultimate confrontation against the encroaching dead. Their apparent ease and proficiency in addressing this crisis further unsettled the very foundations of galactic civilization. The oversight of the stellar community began to wane, leading numerous civilizations to opt for allegiance with the benevolent hosts, thus becoming recognized as warriors against the impending doom. The benevolent hosts pledged to facilitate their return post-crisis, rewarding them for their valiant efforts against the invasion of the deceased. However, not all civilizations embraced this path. Many remained in a state of cautious observation for various reasons, steadfast in their resolve to not abandon their positions until the very last moment. Among these was the vengeful crusade of Cygnus, which, having endured a harrowing struggle against the Chian Empire, now placed their faith solely in themselves. Even in the face of a spectral army that could potentially span epochs, alongside the incineration by their galactic brethren, they did not waver in fear, fervently rallying for war. In addition to such fervently nationalistic civilizations, many others refrained from joining due to the influence of other fallen empires. These diverse and enigmatic remnants of once mighty empires, akin to their deities, yearned for a response from the Guardians, even if they were not vassal civilizations. Their curiosity was particularly piqued by the Guardians, who appeared indifferent to the current invasion of the dead. With a sense of bewilderment regarding the narratives presented by the benevolent hosts, they awaited an alternative explanation from the Guardians. Among the civilizations that declined to align with the benevolent hosts, the Spark Alliance was notably prominent. All were aware of the Spark Alliance's yearning for the observers, which rendered their choice to reject Sanctuary all the more surprising. Nevertheless, the Spark Alliance refrained from elaborating on their stance, diligently persevering in their own endeavors. On this day, while still tracing the historical imprints of the invasion of the dead, the Spark Alliance received a peculiar transmission. Despite the current chaos engulfing galactic communications, they maintained a seamless flow of information and easily intercepted the message. Serving the paradise? Pondered some, questioning the origins of the communication. Yet, they delved into its contents, only to be taken aback. The message originated from an individual long since expelled from their ranks, who had undergone transformation in the service of the paradise, forsaking their original corporeal form to become an extraterrestrial being. Now, this once ostracized individual had sent forth a significant communication. To my esteemed teacher, this is my final communication to you in this capacity. Thereafter, I shall embrace my new identity as a master, and the memories of my time within the Ember Alliance shall remain securely enshrined in the depths of my mind. Concerning the recent incursion of the deceased, my civilization has made discernments and confirmed that those who control the dead are, in fact, a type of fungus. Much like the common cordyceps, these parasitic fungi manipulate the movements of corpses, given their rapid infection rate, akin to that of a disease. We have resolved to designate this phenomenon as cordyceps disease rather than an invasion of the deceased. Comprehensive data has been transmitted alongside this message. Do not presume I have betrayed my beloved automatons. You cannot fathom how splendid this place truly is. I conferred with other masters and automatons before deciding to convey this information myself. After all, you have all put forth great effort. Diligent children deserve a reward. Chapter 142. Cordyceps disease. The fungi that can parasitize other organisms are not exceedingly rare in the natural world, provided the environment is conducive. Virtually every civilization can discover similar entities on their home planet without celestial intervention. Many of these fungi primarily target insects, adapting to their hosts' physical forms to fulfill their growth and reproductive needs. While fungi capable of parasitizing higher animals do exist, they typically manifest as diseases that do not result in the host's demise, nor do they exert control over the host's brain. A typical example would be a type of athlete's foot afflicting certain large primates. However, when extending the scope to interstellar realms, it is entirely plausible for a fungus to parasitize a vast array of life forms and exert control over them. At this moment, scientists of the Ember Alliance have convened to scrutinize the information regarding cordyceps disease transmitted from the paradise of servitude, engaging in spirited discussions. With a meticulous approach, they seek signs that might suggest the information is fraudulent. Yet these exclusionary automatons present irrefutable evidence that these corpse civilizations are, in essence, a manifestation of parasitic fungi. Nonetheless, a question arises. Why do they not directly inform the stellar community of this matter? Have they not already been designated as members of the council? This query was raised, only to be swiftly addressed by another. Did you not hear the concluding remark? This is a reward for our tireless efforts. With the significance of this information, should we survive this crisis, our diplomatic stature will experience an unprecedented elevation. Perhaps the final seat in the council will belong to us. At least the question of why the paradise of servitude chose to share this intelligence has been resolved, yet new inquiries emerge. But I must ask, how did these automatons acquire the corpses and manage to retrieve them from those frenzied legions of the dead? Did they directly vanquish a contingent of the deceased? Some find it difficult to comprehend the source of power possessed by the enigmatic mechanical servant civilization, capable of confronting the legions of the deceased. It is noteworthy that even the compassionate hosts now adopt a defensive posture, erecting space fortresses within their borders rather than proactively engaging the invasion of the dead. There are indeed civilizations that have sought to gather data independently to verify the claims made by the compassionate hosts, only to suffer a resounding defeat at the hands of these spectral entities. Contrary to their outwardly chaotic demeanor, these astral phantoms appear to swiftly discern their enemy's strategies and formations, rendering traps and deceptions nearly ineffective against them. Thus far, no civilization has dared to concentrate their entire fleet in a bid to confront a legion of the deceased in a decisive battle, merely to validate the assertions of a well-regarded lost empire. Or perhaps they simply prefer not to undertake such an endeavor themselves. If another civilization were to do so, they would undoubtedly lend their full support and craft an epic to commemorate those who made significant contributions during the Galactic crisis. In such circumstances, it may be most prudent for the Star Sea community to take the lead, rallying various civilizations to form a galactic coalition, utilizing this task force to gather intelligence. However, the sudden involvement of the compassionate hosts has disrupted all established protocols. Typically, adherence to the Star Sea community's directives is considered standard practice. Yet in the face of commands from the Lost Empire, compliance is imperative, for the Lost Empire remains overwhelmingly powerful over the younger civilizations. This scenario echoes the moment when the Guardians introduced the establishment of a pan-galactic trade market at the first Galactic Conference, garnering unanimous approval. Should the Lost Empire indeed be involved, the authority of the Star Sea community would undoubtedly suffer a significant blow. It is fortunate that the request from the compassionate hosts to relocate the civilizations is of such paramount importance, demanding cautious deliberation. Otherwise, the galactic civilizations would likely have already complied with their directives. This predicament is undeniably regrettable, yet there is little recourse in the vast expanse of space. A fleet remains the most critical measure of strength, and defeat is simply defeat. The scene shifts back to the scientists of the Spark Alliance, who are grappling with the question of how the mechanical servants possess such formidable might to vanquish the legions of the deceased. However, this inquiry is soon overshadowed by a more pressing matter. At least the information provided by those servants is genuine. Their acquisition of it indicates their capability. As those servants have stated, it is a terrifyingly infectious fungus, capable of infecting an entire planet in less than half a month. Moreover, this fungus is not benign. It kills its host, transforming the host's remains into an environment conducive to its survival. All organic remains seem to fall within its parasitic reach, from colossal cosmic creatures like space whales to ordinary insects, each exhibiting corresponding parasitic phenomena. The behavior of these fungal life forms remains unknown. They appear to operate solely on biological instinct, yet they sporadically exhibit inexplicable signs of intelligence, as if guided by an unseen hand. The words of a certain scientist plunged the entire research laboratory into an instant silence. Those who had long harbored doubts about the observer collectively recalled the once vibrant lost empire within the stellar community, now referred to as the benevolent refugee. To be frank, does the benevolent refugee truly remain ignorant of the essence of these spectral beings? After engaging in battle against them for so long, have they never achieved any substantial results? There are numerous suspicions, yet it is prudent to refrain from baseless conjecture. For now, we have merely discerned the corporeal form of these spectral entities, while their origin remains shrouded in mystery. The leader of the Flame Seed Alliance also joined the fray within the research laboratory, a learned scientist in his own right, making his presence in such an arena unsurprising. The paramount concern now is to convey the essence of these spectral beings to the galaxy. This revelation is immensely valuable, whether for civilizations seeking the shelter of the benevolent refugee or those that choose to fight alone. Soon, while the stellar community was still grappling with the turmoil of the spectral invasion, the shared information from the Flame Seed Alliance brought a hint of relief to the heavy atmosphere. It turned out to be a case of cordyceps disease. Related samples were also presented, with irrefutable evidence confirming that the nature of this spectral invasion is an indiscriminate assault by parasitic fungi. Perhaps we can formulate a targeted battle plan based on this insight. A representative from one civilization proposed such a strategy. His civilization was still wavering on the matter of accepting refuge, yet he himself was a staunch advocate for confrontation. If it involves fungi, I recall the underground forest kingdom. Didn't you evolve from fungi? Quickly, deploy your invincible sterilizing agents and devise a solution. The summoned representative of the underground forest kingdom extended his mycelial appendages and responded through his mechanical voice emitter. Fungi cannot be generalized by their nature. We once lost over half of our kin due to a sterilizing agent leak during a moment of extreme rage, yet this does not imply its efficacy against cordyceps disease. This is a matter even the Lost Empire must approach with caution. Do you truly believe it can be so easily vanquished? The debate on how to respond to this spectral invasion continued, yet the revelation of the spectral essence had ignited a glimmer of hope within them. At the very least, before the deadline set by the benevolent refugee arrives, they must continue to fight independently for a while longer. Subsequently, the first proposal related to this crisis was approved. Within the star map, the red blot representing the galactic threat continued to expand, yet it remained nameless. Initially, the stellar community hesitated to name this crisis as the spectral invasion, as suggested by the benevolent refugee. However, with the more definitive information from the Flame Seed Alliance, they resolved to designate this calamity as cordyceps disease, confirming the focal point of the galaxy. Fungal control. Objective: eradicate cordyceps disease. Chapter 143. The myth of cordyceps. The sudden resurgence of the Star Sea community has rekindled hope among numerous civilizations in the galaxy that are reluctant to accept the protection of the benevolent shelter. Despite the esteemed reputation of its predecessor, the observers, and the considerable pressure from the populace's panic, these civilizations find it exceedingly challenging to contemplate the complete transfer of their existence to the benevolent shelter. Unlike the easily swayed masses, the higher echelons of these civilizations possess a deeper understanding and exhibit greater rationality. The demands of the benevolent shelter undeniably require them to relinquish their sovereignty to an extraterrestrial entity, a notion starkly different from mere subjugation. Even if this lost empire articulates the gravity of the situation and the necessity of such measures, they would never make such a decision hastily. What species has not fought through brutal conflicts to ascend to the apex of the food chain? How could a civilization composed of such beings easily forfeit its dominion over itself? Consequently, an unexpected scenario has unfolded, with the civilizations currently accepting the shelter of the benevolent shelter representing a mere fraction, less than 10%, of the total galactic civilizations. Although the threat of incineration looms ominously, there remains a considerable interval before its actualization. During this time, these civilizations will persist in their struggle against the cordyceps plague until they ascertain their inability to prevail. Meanwhile, on the home planet of the benevolent observers, the dissatisfaction among the higher-ups regarding the current galactic situation is palpable. The results have proven to be limited, falling far short of our expectations. Several of the most populous civilizations have yet to respond, which undoubtedly hampers our quest for authenticity. What could be the cause? Our calculations should not yield such significant discrepancies. Is it due to that childish Starsea community? It is truly hard to believe that the number of species arriving at the sanctuary is significantly lower than the benevolent observers anticipated. Initially, they believed that after their admonitions and the threats posed by the corpses of civilizations, by this time, they should have sheltered at least 50 galactic civilizations. The cordyceps plague? A remarkably fitting name, and it is astonishing how swiftly they uncovered the essence of those corpses, perhaps contributing to the discrepancies in our calculations. Who made this discovery? Amidst these questions, a young civilization named the Ember Alliance has emerged in the eyes of these Lost Empire's pioneers. The Ember Alliance? That name rings a bell. It seems we once supported them in constructing a nature reserve. I recall the reverence on their faces when they first encountered us. They resembled our former selves, striving to uplift the indigenous and safeguard natural wildlife. So naive, yet so foolish, another group of wretched souls blinded by falsehoods. If only it were possible, I would embrace the truth alongside them. The lamentations of these pioneers seemed to resonate with others present, drawing them all into a collective sensation of enlightenment amidst the intoxication of ignorance. Soon, the leaders among these individuals proposed that, given the circumstances, they must hasten their pace. Otherwise, the variables would proliferate, complicating matters significantly. The meeting concluded with a hope that true reality could embrace us. Shortly thereafter, the scourge of the cordyceps disease surged with renewed ferocity. The crimson blotches representing the cordyceps disease on the star map had expanded considerably. inevitably leading to genuine confrontations with several civilizations. However, these civilizations, having anticipated the threat, formed a temporary federation and organized a united fleet before the cordyceps outbreak crossed their borders, engaging in a fierce battle within a pre-constructed stellar fortress against the cordyceps biological fleet. Initially, the resistance fared well, upon realizing that the animated corpses were essentially parasitic fungi. Various weapons specifically designed to combat fungi and biological threats were developed. Lacking shields and armor, the cordyceps biological fleet, despite their fearless tenacity, suffered significant losses under targeted assaults. Some vessels, rendered combat ineffective by a mere harmless missile, succumbed due to a virus that disrupted the fungal biological structures injected into the corpses during the missile's explosion, leading to the complete demise of the internal fungi. Observing the increasingly favorable situation, these civilizations once believed they could halt the spread of the cordyceps disease here. However, they soon recognized their miscalculation. Second Fleet Commander, where is your battleship formation? Why are you not firing? Covering fleet, heed my command. Adjust the particle light spear 5 degrees to the left. The commander of the United Fleet, brimming with excitement, was directing the fleet's operations from the interstellar fortress. The chaotic battlefield made it challenging to fully execute his orders, yet he tirelessly shouted commands, gesturing fervently at the battlefield schematic. He perceived a glimmer of victory in this campaign and felt a surge of exhilaration at the prospect of etching his name into history, his body trembling with anticipation. If he achieved a decisive victory against the cordyceps disease under his command, future records of galactic history would proclaim the commander of the United Fleet from Civilization achieved victory against the cordyceps disease within the galaxy. This would be a historic triumph, symbolizing that although his name might only be briefly mentioned, it would be acknowledged among countless civilizations and species throughout the galaxy, significantly embellishing his legacy. However, just as he was filled with hopes for a bright future, devastating news from the front lines abruptly jolted him back to reality as he glanced at the transmitted battle report. It was a harrowing video recording from a frontline ship just before its explosion, and the United Fleet commander's pupils dilated sharply. The footage revealed an unimaginably colossal space creature, long deceased, with its enormous, umbrella-like head displaying horrific gashes resulting from an explosion. The corpse, which should have been quietly drifting in the vastness of space, is now thrashing its colossal tentacles, shredding the battleship as if it were a mere toy. The alloy armor, under the immense force of the giant appendages, is contorted with ease, and the particle beams, regarded as powerful weapons, merely scorch the thick biological shell, producing nothing more than wisps of black smoke. It is the matriarch of the space whales, the terrified voice of a soldier on the front line, who had begun to articulate the shocking revelation, fell silent in an instant, swallowed by an eerie stillness, save for the unsettling sounds of crushing reverberating in the air. The matriarch of the space whales, a mythical creature of the galaxy, possesses a size far exceeding that of ordinary space whales. Upon her initial discovery, this colossal being could effortlessly dismantle a fleet composed of numerous battleships. News of the matriarch's existence had long been absent from the galaxy, yet today, the commander of the United Fleet is fortunate enough to behold her grandeur. Though the matriarch has been dead for some time, her body has been resurrected by those enigmatic fungi. Furthermore, it appears that these fungi have transformed her corpse. The current matriarch possesses a form even more immense than that of gas giant planets. The commander's countenance suddenly turned ashen, and he fell unsteadily to the ground, not due to the sight of the matriarch herself, but because he beheld a multitude of equally formidable beings emerging from the darkness behind her. Chapter 144. The graveyard planet. The battle at this United Star System fortress is not only being observed by the combatants. Young civilizations across the galaxy are also watching this conflict, as its outcome will dictate their strategies. The parasitic disease known as cordyceps, which was initially thought to be effectively contained, has brought forth greater peril than anticipated. No one foresaw that those ancient mythic creatures of space would become part of this affliction. The matriarch of the space whales, along with the commander of the United Fleet, who is leading this battle, now reveals an expression of despair. In addition to the leading matriarch, an increasing number of colossal mythic creatures emerge from the void of darkness. Some of these beings have been recorded in the annals of the galaxy, yet the overwhelming majority remain undiscovered. It is only now that the galactic civilizations comprehend the existence of so many mysterious space titans. Civilizations, including the Spark Alliance, regard this with grave concern, realizing that such a multitude of space giants infected with cordyceps can congregate in one place. These mythic beings possess the power to rival an entire fleet. How many will they ultimately have to confront? Among the mythic creatures currently present, the only ones previously documented are the matriarch of the space whales and the clawbreaker dragon, a scientist from the Spark Alliance. Observing the intermittently disrupted visuals caused by unknown influences, diligently peruses their records. The matriarch of the space whales has been encountered multiple times throughout the galaxy, and the information regarding her is the most comprehensive, making her easily recognizable at a glance. The clawing dragon, a mythical creature, has only one recorded encounter, tragically resulting in the demise of the scientist who discovered it. devoured by this cosmic behemoth. Nevertheless, information pertaining to it was documented and swiftly uncovered by scientists of the Ember Alliance. This legendary entity originated from an archaeological site, the civilization tasked with its excavation. After prolonged efforts and exploration of several associated star systems, ultimately pinpointed the planet indicated by the ruins. At that time, this civilization believed their endeavors were nearing fruition. But just as they were about to unveil the relic, the clawing dragon manifested within that star system, obliterating their archaeological vessel. This cataclysmic event alerted the galaxy to the existence of this mythical beast, although numerous civilizations harbored intentions toward both the clawing dragon and the nearly accessible ruins. Unfortunately, for various reasons, they failed to mobilize a formidable force to eradicate this cosmic monstrosity. Now, the clawing dragon, which had eluded confrontation, has transformed into one of the impending threats looming over them, having been enhanced by the parasitic fungus, rendering it even more terrifying. Eruptions of repulsive mycelium occasionally protrude from its decaying flesh, swaying in the cosmos. Beneath its colossal form radiates an eerie blue luminescence. Strange beams erupt from the mouth of the clawing dragon, annihilating fleets in their path, as shields and armor dissolve into incomprehensible biological energy, compelling onlookers to bow in reverence. These two mythical beings are documented, and despite the modifications from the parasitic fungus, they largely conform to the descriptions within the records. However, what of the others? Many shared the same query as the Ember Alliance scientist, for the remaining entities were unprecedented in their observation. Accompanying the cosmic behemoth were mobile planets. Initially, observers believed they were mistaken, assuming they were drifting planets. However, through the detection of signal fluctuations and gravitational anomalies, they confirmed that these planets could also be classified as biological weapons. These celestial bodies, once potentially habitable, are now infested with a terrifying multitude of fungi, extending from their surfaces to their cores. Continually, landmasses collapse due to fungal activity, hurling rocky debris into the vastness of space. Yet, at the moment of their detachment, the subterranean mycelium, akin to tentacles, retracted the rocky layers, reattaching them with an unsettling cohesion. On the seemingly desolate planets, a vast multitude of biological signals can be detected. Their overwhelming strength even led observers to briefly suspect the presence of other mythical beings. Just as the crowd pondered the purpose of these peculiar planets, the repugnant mycelium on their surfaces began to coalesce and intertwine, rapidly forming structures reminiscent of tree roots. The mycelial roots began to extend further, breaking through the tenuous atmosphere and ensnaring the shattered corpses of extraterrestrial beings drawn together by gravity. Subsequently, it became evident to all that the purpose of this planet was revealed. Those previously inert cordyceps organisms, rendered lifeless by various assaults, exhibited renewed signs of activity under the mycelium's enveloping embrace, once again taking on aggressive postures. The rate of restoration surpassed all expectations. Even corpses that were 80 dismembered, reduced to mere heaps of flesh, which were unrecognizable remnants of their former selves, regained combat efficacy after a period of mending. Indeed, even those cadavers that could be classified as fungal life, as long as they possessed viable organs, could be resurrected by the fungi. Most of the corpses previously deemed inactive had returned to the battlefield, with only those utterly obliterated parts forever lost to the cosmic sea. This undoubtedly dealt a severe blow to the fleet stationed there. Initially, their casualty ratio hovered around 1:15 or even 1:2. But upon the resurgence of what were regarded as mere statistics, this ratio plummeted to a staggering 1:5. They required the concentrated firepower of several warships to completely annihilate a single corpse, yet those that remained only partially destroyed could soon rise again in a different guise. The front line was receding, and the viral missiles, thought to be the nemesis of the fungi, proved increasingly ineffective. Although the viruses within these missiles could indeed disrupt fungal activity, under the planetary scale purification, such toxins were easily decomposed. The commanding officer here labored to halt the line's collapse, but it was merely a matter of time before he too would have to board a shuttle to escape. Clearly, this campaign, which ought to have culminated in a resounding victory against the cordyceps plague, was veering towards defeat. Perhaps this peculiar fungal planet was the very source of the cordyceps affliction. If we could annihilate this planet entirely, we might be able to end this crisis. Yet, such a task is daunting. These planets, due to unknown biological activities, can traverse interstellar distances, and the deeply entrenched mycelium within indicates that complete destruction through simple orbital bombardment is virtually impossible. Nevertheless, we have acquired new information, allowing us to shift our focus accordingly. The nomenclature of the fungal planet was rather arbitrary, as a subject requiring urgent attention. A new name must be devised to underscore its significance in the galactic crisis. Among the remaining young civilizations fiercely battling this crisis within the cosmic community, a swift consensus was reached regarding the redirection of the galactic focus. This is a critical moment, and the proposals in the Council pertain solely to matters concerning the resolution of the crisis. Galactic focus, fungal control, objective, annihilate all necropolis planets. The term necropolis planets was a unique designation bestowed by these young civilizations upon those strange, active worlds, enemies that only exist within the context of this crisis. This planet resembles a cemetery, possessing an inherent quality that seemingly gives birth to an endless array of celestial specters, thus earning its ominous title. As the Galactic Bulletin is updated, the crisis fighters, still valiantly resisting, gain a clearer understanding of this dire situation, shifting their focus towards the annihilation of these graveyard worlds. Chapter 145, The Determination of the Galaxy. The struggle against the Cordyceps plague, after enduring a series of setbacks, has sparked new insights. Based on currently available information, the most formidable space combatants within the plague are likely those controlled mythological beings of the cosmos. These fungal-infested graveyard planets, in a sense, can also be classified as a form of space military power. However, no one has truly engaged them in battle as of yet. While the overt combat strength appears as such, the remarkable regenerative capabilities of these Cordyceps entities suggest that their actual fleet numbers could be exponentially higher. The Starsea community has established a temporary joint research institution where scientists from various civilizations collaborate to develop effective countermeasures against the Cordyceps plague. Much of their research revolves around the topic of deploying a single viral missile to eradicate the fungal life on an entire planet. And they are diligently working on developing more potent fungal viruses to achieve this objective. Moreover, numerous proposals have emerged to curtail the expansion of the Cordyceps plague. Some advocate for a scorched earth approach, seeking to exterminate all known space life and indigenous civilizations, then fortify several bastion star systems to combat the plague. Others propose the widespread dissemination of the fungal virus across multiple star systems, creating a viral barrier to impede the advance of the Cordyceps. Various imaginative scenarios have been suggested, yet few have gained approval. At this juncture, a considerable amount of time remains before the cremation deadline mandated by the benevolent refugees, granting the young civilizations ample opportunity to attempt their resistance against the Cordyceps plague. This situation has led some of the benevolent refugees to regret the lengthy time frame they initially set, pondering whether it would have been wiser to impose a shorter deadline. The resilience of these young civilizations remains notably robust. One cannot help but wonder what has instilled such confidence within them. A senior figure among the benevolent refugees finds this perplexing, struggling to comprehend why these civilizations would endeavor to confront such a cataclysm solely on their own. According to their calculations, the population of Cordyceps entities is sufficient to obliterate the majority of civilizations. They now question whether these young civilizations are simply too naive to accurately assess the disparity in strength between themselves and their adversaries, leading to such a reckless decision. Nevertheless, the urgency resides with them. We possess an abundance of time. It is likely that before long, they will come to recognize the chasm that separates them from their foes. Only these tenacious beings seem truly capable of shaking the foundations of this virtual realm. Thus, the benevolent refugees maintain their vigilant stance, occasionally bestowing gifts upon those civilizations under their protection to demonstrate their goodwill. Although there are still voices among the populace of the galaxy yearning for the benevolent shelter of refuge, the overwhelming majority remain steadfast in their faith in their government, supporting the actions of civilized authorities. The spread of the Cordyceps disease has been rapid. The temporary federations that had formed previously became battlegrounds following their defeat in the Fortress Galaxy campaign. Despite the support from the Starsea community, this battlefield swiftly descended into chaos, leading to the retreat of these civilizations from their positions. Among them, some chose to accept the shelter of the benevolent, yet the vast majority stood their ground, continuing to fight within the refugee systems designated by the Starsea community. In this endeavor, the Alliance of the Spark played a pivotal role. The Alliance generously offered the habitable planets they had once discovered as new mother worlds for these fleeing civilizations. Habitable planets in the cosmos are exceedingly precious, yet the Alliance refrained from colonizing these worlds, opting instead for minimal development in order to protect extraterrestrial wildlife. The Alliance realized that this was not the time to focus on wildlife. Should they be defeated, the fate of these creatures would not be any better. Thus, when they provided planets for the refugee civilizations, many were astonished to discover that this civilization, so eager to uplift the indigenous, possessed such an abundance of habitable worlds. Had the Alliance chosen to colonize, they would have emerged as a leading civilization in the galaxy within decades. However, mere possession of planets was insufficient. Although the refugee civilizations came equipped with developmental tools, the time required for rejuvenation remained excessively long. Consequently, the galactic civilizations united like never before, inspired by the selfless contributions of the Alliance. Notably, the Conqueror Empire was particularly generous, believing that if even a small nation like the Alliance could donate planets, they, as a great empire, should offer even more to uphold their imperial dignity. A vast array of production and construction resources was dispatched to these refugee civilizations, accompanied by several small fleets equipped for basic self-defense. Furthermore, the servants of Paradise and the Galactic Kin also lent their support. One provided infrastructure while the other delivered construction drones, expediting the reconstruction efforts of the displaced civilizations. These two peculiar mechanical civilizations were still far removed from the regions afflicted by the Cordyceps outbreak, seemingly untroubled by the crisis, which aroused curiosity among others. The enigmatic nature of these machines was not a new phenomenon, just as they could not comprehend why the servants of paradise were exclusionary. They soon interpreted this behavior as a unique characteristic of mechanical intelligence's absolute calm. Thus, with the financial and physical support of the galaxy's civilizations, the refugee communities swiftly rebuilt their civil strongholds, reaffirming their resolve to combat the cordyceps disease to the very end. Their efforts were not entirely in vain. As those who once battled against the cordyceps disease on the front lines, they found themselves unfortunate as the outbreak occurred in their vicinity. Yet, no one sought to take advantage of their plight. Instead, everyone, without exception, extended whatever assistance they could muster. Perhaps this galaxy is not as indifferent as it may seem at times. However, the cordyceps disease continued its rampant assault. Following the failure of the first civilization's resistance, the second civilization was prepared to face the impending onslaught. The Starseed community had strategically deployed toxic gases at the entrances of hyperspace routes in several key star systems, a measure intended to buy us some time. The number of support fleets from other civilizations was limited, with the vast majority concentrated at the final line of defense, leaving only a small contingent here. Nevertheless, I believe all present comprehend our mission. The commander of the joint fleet surveyed the solemn assembly of federal warriors from his vantage point atop the platform, his expression grave as he proclaimed, "We do not seek victory, we merely aim to buy more time for others. Identifying the weaknesses of the cordyceps disease is one of our tasks, but it is not a strict requirement. Each of you hails from different civilizations and diverse races. Though we may have had our conflicts in the past, we now unite for a singular purpose. I am honored to serve as the supreme commander in this battle, standing shoulder to shoulder with you. Even if many shall find eternal rest among the cosmos in this conflict, we will ensure that the mastermind behind all this recognizes that we shall not retreat." Amidst a deafening roar of cheers, all warriors began boarding their warships. To prevent their bodies from falling into enemy hands, every vessel was equipped with a self-destruct mechanism. Yet, none of them feared the forthcoming battle. This would be their honor and their resolve. Chapter 146. Is it you who lured the enemy? The battle unfolding in the Valley Star system may very well become a significant chapter in the annals of galactic history. While most galactic civilizations diligently advanced their fungal control efforts behind the front lines, the defensive fleet in this region engaged in a monumental clash with the cordyceps disease. True to the name of the Valley Star system, this region occupies a channel-like interstellar position, serving as a strategic stronghold. Although it is possible to bypass this location and advance from other star systems, the time required would be exponentially greater. Hyperspace routes do not necessarily connect every star system. The galaxy has repeatedly discovered instances where star systems, despite being in close proximity, lack a hyperspace link, defying logical expectation. What should be a single hyperspace journey often necessitates traversing 4 or 5 star systems to reach a seemingly nearby destination. While scientists within the galaxy have speculated that these hyperspace routes were constructed by some ancient civilization, they are left to ponder the motives behind such decisions. The star systems near the Valley of Shadows occupy a precarious position, temporarily obstructed by a carefully prepared cloud of lethal gas, which shields the entrance to the hyperspace route from the relatively nearby galaxies. This toxin has been proven effective against the cordyceps plague, and in order to produce a substantial quantity of gas that can maintain sufficient density across several astronomical units, many robots have been rendered inoperable on the production line. Presently, this batch of toxic gas, which temporarily blocks the hyperspace route, represents the entirety of what the galactic civilizations can muster, all of which has been deployed in this conflict. Indeed, it has served to hinder the expansion of the cordyceps plague, delaying its spread as numerous cordyceps biological fleets begin to pour into the pre-designated traps of the Valley of Shadows. The defenders here form a temporary federation led by a frontline civilization, not only enduring the second wave of the cordyceps plague's onslaught, but also bearing numerous responsibilities. They must delay for as long as possible, testing the effectiveness of new weaponry against the cordyceps organisms while procuring additional corpse samples. Research on the cordyceps plague has yielded promising leads, yet the crucial questions remain unanswered. Current knowledge indicates that the civilizations formed by the cordyceps lack any means of communication. These fungi likely possess no intelligence, expanding chaotically by instinct, unaware of the strategic choke points marked on star maps. They may reinforce their numbers in response to significant damage in the Valley of Shadows, but they will not perceive this location as a critical target for attack. This hypothesis has proven accurate. The biological fleets of the cordyceps invading the Valley of Shadows are indistinguishable from those assaulting other star systems. Along the periphery of this galaxy, numerous deceptive mines lie in wait, crafted from the most potent explosives, knowing that these peculiar fungi possess formidable regenerative capabilities when exposed to corpses. Some of these mines are relics from millennia past, and it has been ages since space mines last featured prominently in battle. Yet, they have unexpectedly found new life in the struggle against the cordyceps plague. The main battle fleet, led by the Titan flagship, has secured a safe position within the galaxy, with all main cannons fully charged. The moment the cordyceps biological fleet reveals itself, these capital ships will unleash a volley, delivering the initial blow to the plague. Even if 80 of the casualties within this strike can revive after a period, it will still consume valuable time for the cordyceps, which is a critical objective for the defenders. In addition, the smaller interstellar defense turrets and other skirmishing fleets are armed with virus missiles, designed to inflict substantial damage on the enemy, boasting a 300 effectiveness against fungi. Meanwhile, the large interstellar defense turrets near the star are equipped with the latest research from the Star-C Consortium, matter disintegrators. This technology, derived from the legacies left by the Silent Ones, was originally intended to rediscover lost productivity technologies, thereby enhancing the overall developmental efficiency of galactic civilizations. However, the sudden crisis of the cordyceps disease shifted the focus of research. The weapons employed by these higher-dimensional beings were ultimately deciphered and mastered by civilizations within our own dimension, and were subsequently utilized to combat new natural disasters. These high-dimensional weapons, capable of inflicting destruction by distorting the laws of physics, could deliver devastating blows to the cordyceps' biological fleets. Objects struck directly would evaporate into thin air, and with just a few more strikes, a corpse could lose over 98 of its mass. This was undoubtedly detrimental for the fungi that required suturing the bodies, especially considering that the fungi themselves could also evaporate under the rays of the matter disintegrators. Thus, the defense of the Valley Galaxy commenced on a promising note, reminiscent of familiar scenes from the past. The efficacy of the matter disintegrators against the cordyceps' biological fleets was also confirmed, leading to an influx of observational data and improved hypotheses uploaded to the Star-C community. Everything seemed to be progressing favorably until the arrival of the cordyceps' mythological beings and the graveyard planet in this galaxy. The leading space whale matriarch and the rending claw dragon altered the balance of power. The effective matter disintegrators had limited impact on the matriarch. Its colossal form served as the best defense, while part of its body may have vanished. The mycelium within began to capture morsels floating in space to mend the evaporated wounds. The space whale matriarch drew the fire, allowing the rending claw dragon to find its opportunities to strike. The long-prepared dragon breath beam was unleashed upon the large defensive turrets, and the shields in front of the turrets failed to deflect any of the assault. The armor of the turrets melted into pools of molten metal after enduring mere half a second of the onslaught. With a sweeping attack, it obliterated several large defensive turrets, prompting the defensive fleet and turrets to redirect their fire towards this mythological creature endowed with formidable long-range attack capabilities. However, contrary to its massive size, the rending claw dragon exhibited extraordinary agility. Countless matter disintegrators and particle lances narrowly missed it, leaving gunners lamenting their near misses. Though some attacks indeed struck the rending claw dragon, much like the space whale matriarch, its substantial body provided ample protection. Minor injuries did not hinder its movement. Consequently, the main fleet stationed here concentrated their fire on the space whale matriarch, which lacked the same mobility as the rending claw dragon. Yet, with the absence of heavy fire support from allies, the pressure on the skirmishing fleets at the front line began to mount significantly. The emergence of the graveyard planet enabled a swifter assembly of the fragmented corpses, granting life to all drifting remains. It was observed that an elite combatant managed to slay the same cordyceps creature no less than 10 times within a single day, only to finally call for a matter disintegrator strike to completely eradicate that particular cordyceps being. Although the viral missiles exhibit exceptional efficacy against individual targets, incapacitating the cordyceps organisms upon impact, they are rendered less effective by the terrifying resurrection capabilities of the Necropolis planet. The toxins that can affect individual biological entities yield limited results against a planetary-scale entity, perhaps as envisioned by the temporary coalition. Only a toxin potent enough to annihilate an entire planet could prove effective against the Necropolis planet. However, even the launch of tens of thousands of missiles would be futile in achieving such a magnitude. It would be far more prudent to research a singular missile capable of obliterating the Necropolis planet with a lethal poison, which would effectively neutralize the galactic threat posed by the cordyceps plague. Consequently, the front lines continue to advance relentlessly towards the stellar stronghold, with the coalition fleet suffering losses by the minute, while the cordyceps armada appears inexhaustible. Despite the inevitability of defeat, the station troops here have made remarkable contributions. The concentrated fire on the space whale matriarch ultimately could not withstand the relentless barrage of heavy artillery and countless missiles. The substantial damage inflicted led this ancient creature back into silence. Once a formidable behemoth, it has now diminished significantly, its body marred by numerous explosive scars. Many inert missiles remain lodged within its form, and if detonated, they could cause further devastation. Not only were spears of light and material disintegrators assaulting it, but such a colossal body also made for an excellent target for viral missiles. After the infusion of a vast quantity of toxins, the parasitic fungi within it briefly succumbed to a state of dormancy. Yet, it did not perish. Can a body already dead die again? As long as its physical form remains intact, the Necropolis planet will inevitably rouse this gigantic beast once more. However, for the coalition forces, this is sufficient. At least for the time being, the space whale matriarch will vanish from the battlefield. In addition to the matriarch, the rending claw dragon also suffered considerable damage. Its terrifying breath beam obliterated numerous large defensive turrets, and many battleships erupted in the brilliance of its lethal glow. Nonetheless, the coalition forces managed to pierce its wings. These peculiar biological appendages, which once afforded it agile maneuverability, now dangle precariously, failing to serve their intended purpose. Had it not been for the destruction it wrought upon the coalition forces, alleviating some of the pressure it faced, it too might have succumbed to slumber. The staunch resistance of the Valley Galaxy persisted until the toxic gas deployed in other star systems was breached, marking the expansion of the cordyceps plague beyond this singular front. Nevertheless, the duration of their defense remains commendable. Perhaps as the benevolent benefactor suggested, steadfastness in a single location, armed with the appropriate weaponry, can ultimately eradicate these cosmic specters. In an orderly retreat, the Valley Galaxy is now left with the haunting remnants of battle, where one could almost perceive the acrid scent of gunpowder wafting through the vacuum. Drifting through the expanse are countless fragments of metal and debris, colliding and altering their trajectories. Perhaps, after the crisis of the cordyceps plague is averted, someone may come to salvage the remnants scattered here. Yet, it is equally plausible that this site will become a permanent battlefield, a testament to the fierce bloodshed that has transpired across the galaxy. The cordyceps plague continues to ravage, and all are united in their quest for a solution. Even though the secondary defense line has been breached, this battle has nonetheless invigorated the Starseed community, as the invaluable data gathered from the battlefield and the hard-won samples of the deceased provide new avenues for researching methods to combat the fungus. Numerous optimization measures have already commenced, and there remains a considerable distance before the cordyceps plague reaches the final defense line. While the countdown to the threat from the merciful hosts has yet to expire, not only is civilization as a whole striving towards a resolution, but individuals within it are also exploring unconventional means to thwart the impending crisis. I am known as the Lone Wolf, and today marks the 270th day of my 525th interstellar expedition. This solitary explorer navigates his vessel with great caution, narrowly avoiding an oncoming asteroid, all the while unfazed as he meticulously records his journal. He is an unheralded interstellar legend. His remarkable tally of 525 expeditions speaks volumes. Some will never embark on a single interstellar journey in their lifetime, yet he has accomplished over 500 and remains alive to tell the tale. He does not boast of his achievements. Instead, he diligently documents his experiences day after day, handwriting them and compiling data, perhaps until his final breath. The galaxy may remain unaware of the legendary adventurer who once roamed its vastness. The spread of the cordyceps plague is unprecedented, and many across the galaxy deem it a calamity, a sentiment I share. The strength of any single individual seems futile against this galactic crisis. Perhaps my most prudent course of action would be to abandon my nomadic existence and join a mercenary group, ultimately perishing on the battlefield. However, before I resort to that, I might attempt to devise some means to help curb the cordyceps plague. Thus concludes my entry. The Lone Wolf deftly maneuvered his ship, narrowly evading an incoming meteorite, and through the vessel's equipment, he glimpsed the relentless creatures pursuing him. Each of these beings was unmistakably infiltrated by fungal mycelium, their very essence corrupted from within. What else could they be but cordyceps organisms? Following their instincts, the cordyceps plague expands, and conventional methods of enticement utterly fail to disrupt their advance. They persistently maintain a substantial biomass of cordyceps, unyielding to external lures that might entice any of their kind to stray. But who is the Lone Wolf? He is a legendary adventurer who has undertaken over 500 interstellar journeys. He pilots his ship, laden with specially crafted meat designed to attract the fungi, boldly weaving through the ranks of the cordyceps fleet until the fungal beings, deprived of their instinctual responses for too long, begin to exhibit signs of impatience. With unparalleled driving skills, he deftly activated the fungi in this location single-handedly. Although large-scale advancement persisted, the spread of the cordyceps disease here was unmistakably swifter than in other regions. Consequently, the red areas on the star map representing the cordyceps disease exhibited a distinctive protrusion in this vicinity. The results were promising. The Lone Wolf, through drones left in the original star system, observed the advancing signs of the cordyceps organisms, confirming they were in pursuit of him. Before he turned his gaze towards his next destination, "I hope you can be formidable," he thought, contemplating the lost empire of the Hive. His final destination, an agricultural star system marked as exceedingly perilous by the galactic civilizations. This place harbored all the food preserved since the inception of the Pressolin, typically patrolled by beings from the Pressolin. However, the Lone Wolf noted that recently, the Pressolin appeared preoccupied with other matters, withdrawing the majority of their combat forces. They seemed to acknowledge that the agricultural star system had become one of the galactic forbidden zones, thus they confidently retracted their guards. Little did they know, this location was soon to be graced by an unexpected adversary capable of commandeering food supplies. Chapter 147. This is the granary. It is you who should depart. The agricultural star system was not originally known by this name. It was merely an inconspicuous entity among the myriad numbered star systems of the galaxy. Once, only astronomers occasionally monitored the stellar conditions of this system, recording data before the star's demise. However, Everything transformed when the Presolin began to value this system. It lacked any gaseous giants, instead replaced by a multitude of ordinary planets. The celestial bodies formed numerous planets through evolutionary processes, yet none could sustain life. The galactic civilization dismissed this barren system, but the Presolin deemed it an excellent repository for food supplies. Enormous quantities of food, after processing, were stored on these desolate planets, comprising industrially synthesized food, though the majority consisted of various carcasses of space wildlife. Expanding the food production chain proved cumbersome, consuming the original industrial capacity. For many civilizations, hunting the seemingly endless space creatures was the most convenient option. Thus, it was evident that the agricultural star system was piled high with biological remains. The lone wolf discovered the vulnerability of the granary's defenses, harboring the intent to entangle this peculiar lost empire of the hive in turmoil. He directed the cordyceps disease to this location. Still, there was no one stationed here. The lone wolf swiftly traversed the star system and departed through a hyperspace route leading in another direction. The cordyceps had yet to pursue him, but directing those organisms near the granary sufficed. The instinct-driven cordyceps would soon discern the abundance of corpses within this system, and how the Presolin would react was not a concern for these fungi. My actions are indeed detestable. Perhaps in the future, I shall find myself pursued by the Plezarins. The lone wolf quietly tucked his diary into his bosom, repeatedly altering the spacecraft's identification code, ultimately abandoning it on a forgotten planet. He then assumed a new identity as a novice among a band of mercenaries, preparing to combat the rampant blight of the galactic cordyceps. Meanwhile, the enticed cordyceps creatures, upon nearing the granary star system, stumbled upon this place replete with corpses and eagerly charged in. At this juncture, the Plezarins remained oblivious to these developments. Their queen convened all individuals in the field, attentively absorbing teachings from the guardians within the incubation system star system. These refugees from beyond the galaxy exhibited a fervent desire to cultivate the land, frequently seeking counsel from Li Wenyuan, the mechanical intelligence intricately linked to humanity. They embarked on a unique evolutionary path. Perhaps, upon reaching the pinnacle of hive civilization within the galaxy, they too would mirror this form. Given the Plezarins' gentle disposition, Li Wenyuan occasionally found the time to address some of their developmental inquiries. In truth, humanity's prior teachings had been remarkably comprehensive, and the current Plezarins even possessed a complete technological tree of their own. Their questions predominantly revolved around the feasibility of their actions, the vast majority of which were indeed viable. These ever-fleeing extraterrestrial beings had once forged a brilliant civilization, which, although gradually forgotten during their flight, humanity managed to rekindle within them a recollection of their past developmental trajectory. Nonetheless, the Plezarins maintained a cautiously meticulous attitude towards all matters, even requiring that any wild animal undergo an intelligence test before feeling assured enough to hunt it. They also treated others with great kindness. Every civilization passing through the incubation system star system received a small biological token of goodwill. Almost all civilizations fervently pursuing genetic advancements would frequently visit the incubation system to establish familiarity. These biological tokens, to the Plezarins, were mere inconsequential exuviae. Yet for these civilizations, they held immense research value. Even those civilizations less interested in genetic technology would occasionally drop by the incubation system, passing these tokens along to those in need. Although the Plezarins exhibited slight agitation regarding issues within the granary star system, every fallen empire harbors its own taboos. Such seemingly customary matters have been catalogued in the essential reading for celestial civilizations, the taboos of the Lost Empire, akin to the prohibition against colonizing sacred sites, which would surely incite the ire of the Lost Empire. Recently, while the galaxy contended with the rampant cordyceps blight, the Plezarins paid little heed to these events, steadfastly tending to their own small domain. However, due to their newfound insights into agriculture, the Plezarin Queen briefly summoned individuals from patrols, including those in the granary star system, to witness the results of their latest experiments. Although they exist within the collective consciousness of hive-minded thinking, perhaps influenced by humanity, they equally place great importance on the sense of ritual. Having lived in the grain storage galaxy for an extended period, this young queen feels that occasionally loosening the reins would not pose a problem. For the sake of ritual, she requires all individuals to witness together. We may have discovered an inexhaustible source of sustenance. The fragmented biological signals from Queen Presolin reached Li Wenyuan, specifically intended for him. Due to his unique status, he was also invited to observe Presolin's ceremony. This was not a challenging endeavor for Li Wenyuan. He merely dispatched a research vessel to this location, allocating a portion of his consciousness here while continuing with his other pursuits. Initially, he held little interest in the rampant cordyceps disease plaguing the galaxy. Rather, he was more concerned with the observer's abrupt reactions to the situation. Having conducted a slight investigation into the parasitic fungi, he found their technological sophistication rather unimpressive. The current dominance of cordyceps disease is founded upon an excessively vast population, a supremacy derived from prolonged temporal accumulation. Prior to this, galactic civilization had not encountered any signs of cordyceps disease. It emerged suddenly, as if it had long been concealed in some exceedingly secretive places, waiting for the accumulation of power to culminate before resurfacing. However, through the study of the cordyceps fungi, not only Li Wenyuan but other galactic civilizations discovered that these fungi lacked intelligence. Could this millennia-long buildup merely be instinctual? Although galactic civilizations were preoccupied with combating cordyceps disease and lacked time to ponder this matter, Li Wenyuan delved deeper, uncovering some anomalies. The source of these anomalies remained those mythical creatures parasitized by the cordyceps fungi, with the most recent sighting record of the space whale matriarch occurring approximately 20 years ago. At that time, there was no trace of cordyceps disease. When did it kill and control the space whale matriarch? The instinct to seek benefit and avoid harm is inherent in all living beings, especially for such a legendary creature that has endured countless ages and battled numerous civilizations. With some subtle and elusive tidbits of information, Li Wenyuan discovered what might be the site of the space whale matriarch's demise. Within that star system, vast severed tentacles of the matriarch still drifted, the evidence suggesting the result of a formidable light spear. Such weapons are not commonly possessed by civilizations in the galaxy, with the Lost Empire being the primary user. The distance from there to the current cordyceps outbreak is quite substantial, yet the corpse has vanished without a trace. Under normal circumstances, hyperspace travel would require 5 to 6 years, so how did the body end up in the clutches of the cordyceps disease? Ultimately, all clues point toward a certain Lost Empire, which has reacted most intensely to this matter. Thus, Li Wenyuan is indeed curious as to why this Lost Empire would stage such a self-directed drama, merely to garner worthless fame? He has witnessed the demise and rebirth of 3 Lost Empires, with the final one, which existed prior to his arrival, becoming the focal point of his attention during this period. However, the immediate priority remains to listen to the report from Pressorin, who has so earnestly invited him. It is imperative that he regards this matter with due seriousness. Our latest evolutionary achievement has enabled us to directly harness cosmic radiation as nourishment for our physical forms. Thus, under the directive of the young queen, a prepared worker bee severed its own tail. This substantial piece of flesh was comparable in size to a frigate, writhing vibrantly in the vacuum of space, representing a remarkably fresh source of sustenance. The worker bee, brimming with delight, carried this morsel to a temporary storage facility within the incubation sector of the star system. Bathed in cosmic radiation, it would take less than a month for the bee to regenerate its tail. With this, we shall be free from worries about food. Isn't that impressive? The young queen seemed to seek Li Wenyuan's opinion as she concluded her statement, and amidst Pressorin's fearsome visage, one could discern a glimmer of human expectation. Li Wenyuan felt at a loss for words. Despite the ability to directly convert cosmic radiation into necessary energy, there remained an unwavering attachment to the act of consumption. It appeared that Pressorin harbored an extraordinary fixation on food, one so profound that even with a more efficient method at hand, the tradition of consumption persisted. Yet, observing the queen's hopeful expression, Li Wenyuan ultimately chose not to shatter her ideals and expressed his agreement instead. Thus, the ceremony for the unveiling of this infinite food technology swiftly concluded, and the patrol teams belonging to the Granary Star System set forth once more. Meanwhile, Li Wenyuan, intrigued by Pressorin's efficient biological technology for converting cosmic radiation, decided to remain temporarily to delve deeper into this research. However, before he could engage in conversation with the young queen, she experienced a sudden and intense fluctuation in biological signals, as if she had stumbled upon something of monumental significance. This signal underwent several transformations, shifting from disconnection to shock, then to sorrow, and finally to anger, revealing the tumultuous upheaval within her heart. There are rodents, pests that require eradication. Pressorin's signal echoed. Listening intently, Li Wenyuan swiftly shifted his gaze towards the Granary Star System, fully aware of its significance to Pressorin. There, he beheld the vast granary, where several planets had been rendered desolate, their corpses floating in space like ducks escaping from an open mouth. Initially, upon arriving, Pressorin had thought she was mistaken, wondering if their obsession with food had led them to hallucinate the bizarre sight of it fleeing. Yet, reality delivered a heavy blow. The food had indeed vanished. The remnants of various organisms were grotesquely stitched together by the cordyceps fungus, and the bizarre biological activity breathed life into these entities once more. A warrior of the Pressolans, in a state of disbelief, approached to reclaim food, only to be struck in the face by its own meal's tail, leaving him momentarily stunned in the cosmos. The Pressolans had long traversed the path of biological evolution, and even their smallest warriors could be deemed terrifying, monstrous beings of the void. Although the prolonged era of peace had dulled their claws, it certainly did not signify that these weapons, companions for ages, had lost their former luster. Soon, a wave of fury surged throughout the hive mind network. The Pressolan swarm, moving directly through hyperspace, surged toward the granary systems, revealing their horrific potential for the first time as extraterrestrial refugees. Chapter 148. The unforeseen foe as a genuine calamity that had yet to wreak havoc across the galaxy before being decisively dealt with. The Pressolans effortlessly obliterated the troublesome cordyceps creatures that plagued galactic civilization. Their acidic spray, a fusion of various biochemical substances, possessed a terrifying corrosiveness comparable to a matter disintegrator. The cordyceps organisms, once doused, disintegrated into wisps of white smoke in less than half a minute. The first time witnessing the Prezolins in combat. Li Wenyuan was also delighted to illuminate new technological advancements. Calamity weapon diversification, Solon protozoa. Technology level 6. Description: these unfortunate creatures can only defend themselves using the chemical substances produced within their bodies. Their acidic sprays can even be dispersed by point defense weapons. Why can't they unleash a massive beam like the Ether Dragon? Perhaps we should employ genetic engineering to enhance their self-defense capabilities. Potential technology, none. Alongside this technology, a unique component for a planet-destroying weapon was unlocked. Incubation injection. Component: planet-destroying weapon. Description: research on the Prezolins has allowed us to inject vast amounts of nutrient liquid into a planet's interior via titanic constructs. In this manner, a planet-sized egg would be birthed. We can accelerate this process or patiently observe until the moment of hatching. It sounded akin to a cosmic incubator. Yet the implications of a planet hatching were sufficient to validate the term planet-destroying weapon. However, these newfound advancements held little utility for Li Wenyuan at present. He was more engrossed in observing the combat prowess of the Prezolins. This formidable group of beasts, far more terrifying than the cordyceps organisms, showcased their true strength. Initially utilizing the acidic spray, which had evaporated countless cordyceps creatures, the Prezolins soon set it aside. Having calmed from their rage, they began to lament the annihilated beings. For them, those were edible resources. While they were indeed living food, there must be a way to resolve this dilemma. Thus, Prezolin abandoned the acidic assault and resorted to the primal act of biting to deal with the flesh stitched together by fungi. The once invincible parasitic entity, the cordyceps fungus, encountered its nemesis at that moment. Its tendrils were utterly powerless against Prezolin's formidable physique. Even if spores managed to fortuitously enter Prezolin's wounds, they would be transformed into sustenance by the immune system of this being. Not to mention the portions that were consumed, the vast majority of which were converted into energy for Prezolin within mere minutes. To Prezolin, those cordyceps fungi, which instilled fear throughout the galaxy, were merely a type of food, akin to a bothersome morsel. Some of the flesh, after being dismembered, continued to move due to the activity of the internal fungi. But Prezolin quickly evolved specialized venom glands, allowing a single bite to render the cordyceps creatures lifeless once more. Consequently, the cordyceps invaders of the Granary star system were swiftly eradicated, and Prezolin's food supply not only remained intact, but actually increased. Although the biological fleet afflicted by cordyceps disease seemed endless, Prezolin exhibited an overwhelming dominance over them. These refugees from beyond the galaxy also possessed a terrifying capacity for proliferation. However, their indifference to this fact, solely focused on stockpiling food, rendered their biomass appear significantly smaller. Yet, if they decided to commence reproduction using their amassed provisions, their numbers could reach alarming proportions in a short span of time. After calming her fury, the Prezolin queen began to contemplate the number of cordyceps beings within the galaxy and how she could obtain more food with minimal resources. She had realized that these cordyceps creatures lacked intelligence, and what posed a challenge to galactic civilization seemed to her merely a collection of moving drumsticks, which she yearned to incorporate into Prezolin's granary. Thus, she pondered this matter and tentatively inquired with the Guardian about its feasibility. Should the Guardian disallow her, she would have to resign herself to a regrettable fate, languishing in the hatchery. Can we consume those cordyceps beings, given their lack of intelligence? She asked cautiously. Yet Li Wenyuan did not deter her aspirations. He remained curious about what the benevolent protector truly intended. The goals of this fallen empire appeared to be intertwined with those of galactic civilizations. They seemed to be attempting to bring all galactic civilizations under their control. Though whether this truly involved a decisive battle against the cordyceps plague remained debatable. However, it was not necessary for Prezolin to take action herself, as he would intervene after the galactic civilizations had exerted their utmost efforts and still failed to eliminate the cordyceps threat, thus eradicating it entirely. Regardless of the benevolent protector's intentions, attempts to dominate and annihilate all galactic civilizations would not be permitted. Prezolin merely acted on his behalf in advance. Thus, it was not long before the galactic civilizations, including the Starseed community, received an unexpected communique. The granary has been raided by despicable rodents. Such behavior is intolerable to the Prezolins. We shall exterminate these abhorrent pests and reclaim their remains. Initially, this perplexing message left the various civilizations astonished. However, upon discovering the sender, their bewilderment dissipated. It was the lost empire of the Hive. The familiarity of the granary's plight made sense now. Their involvement in the conflict was indeed fortuitous, as it would undoubtedly alleviate some of our burdens. But how exactly did they engage? They alluded to the granary being compromised by rodent incursions, suggesting that the granary system had suffered. Yet, was it not situated far from the blight of the fungus disease? The meeting chamber of the Starseed community fell into an eerie silence. Based on their calculations regarding the spread of the fungus disease, they would confront it before these spaceborne specters could reach the granary. However, an unforeseen circumstance had entangled the otherwise uninvolved Lost Empire into the fray, leaving everyone baffled. Representatives from various civilizations exchanged glances, silently speculating about the source of this conundrum. Nonetheless, this development was ultimately a positive one. The fungus disease could not have anticipated such an unexpected adversary, could it? In contrast to the enthusiasm of others, the Spark Alliance appeared increasingly uneasy, sensing that events were taking an unforeseen turn. The leader of the Spark Alliance was also aware of the exchanges transpiring within the Starsea community, his countenance betraying a look of concern. An unexpected enemy? He pondered the enigmatic Lost Empire, seemingly intertwined with the crisis of the fungus disease. One could only hope they were not a genuine, unforeseen foe. Thus concludes this chapter. Chapter 149. A benevolent decision. The Harbinger arrived in the galaxy long before it was civilized, inspiring all creation. Thus, the realm of civilization was born, and solitude and silence ceased to dominate the galaxy. The cosmos continues to expand, yet our proximity intensifies from that day forth. It is not the frigid distance that connects us, but rather every corner of our world. Throughout the long passage of time, we gradually comprehended the thoughts of the Harbinger and dedicated ourselves to this pursuit. It can be said that the Harbinger shaped who we are today, and the observers you know are the successor civilization that continues the path of the Harbinger. A group wandered through the observation corridor, with the leader passionately recounting tales of their past, while the followers behind them held their breath, listening reverently to the voice of the one ahead. Beneath the corridor lay a verdant shade, an expansive meadow forest stretching endlessly, with only the faint pillars visible in the skyline indicating their location. This was the refuge Halo world, and the distant pillars marked another segment of the Halo world. Though interconnected, the great pillars appear as colossal structures vanishing into the clouds from a distance. The group of sightseers floating within the ethereal corridor comprises dignitaries from various civilizations, accompanied by an observer from a benevolent patron. It remains uncertain whether this observer's motives stem from a desire for ostentation or other purposes, as they requested the sheltered civilizations to jointly inspect the environment of this ring world. The civilizations, reliant on their protector, had no recourse but to dispatch prominent figures to accompany the observer of this lost empire. Consequently, they paused their narratives, for the observer seemed quite loquacious, swiftly shifting topics with each passing moment. 1 minute, he spoke of the habits of rare creatures. The next, he spun tales of ancient lore, the authenticity of which was questionable. Strangely, his memory appeared faltering, as the story of the enigmatic Harbinger had been recounted to these dignitaries no less than 10 times. Yet the observer remained undeterred. Once again, the Harbinger, and yet again, the enigmatic teachings. Did you too share the eccentricities of the long-gone watchers? Such thoughts flickered through one mind. Yet this fleeting notion was swiftly quelled as the individual mentally summoned a calming agent from their internal augmentations. Regret washed over him for allowing such foolish musings to surface after years of navigating the political arena. The first lesson before engaging in diplomacy was to consciously control one's thoughts, ensuring a stance of neutrality at all times. While a relaxed demeanor might be permissible in a position of advantage, the Lost Empire possessed unfathomable technology. And this galaxy still bore the presence of the mysterious phenomenon known as psychic energy. Constantly harboring disparaging thoughts would inevitably lead to exposure. Each diplomat endeavored to purge their minds of malevolent inclinations. Perhaps it had been too long since he had engaged in this role, leading to such a fundamental mistake. Thus, he bowed his head further, unable to meet the gaze of the benevolent observer. In contrast to his diplomatic blunder, the other dignitaries from the sheltered civilizations were deeply engrossed in the tales recounted by the patron. Although the narrative seemed fantastical, words uttered by the Lost Empire commanded attention. The stories related to the Harbingers had quietly traversed through their respective devices back to their civilizations. The Harbinger, could it indeed be a reality? Was it a remnant of a civilization even older than the Lost Empire? The terrifying nature of the Lost Empire raised questions about the capabilities of this ancient realm. Believed to have laid the foundation for galactic civilization, it was almost inconceivable. Did such civilizations truly exist within the cosmos? Not only one person holds such a belief. In fact, a considerable majority harbor skepticism towards the narratives recounted by the benevolent sheltering observers. After all, the tale sounds rather fantastical. Judging by the accomplishments described by these kind guardians, the civilization of the Harbingers could be regarded as a godlike entity. Such feats typically belong to the realm of myth. Thus far, no one has ever contemplated that a singular civilization could achieve such monumental success. In summary, these sheltered civilizations maintain a stance of cautious belief, documenting the tales of the Harbingers in their most confidential archives. Once the crisis of the cordyceps disease is resolved, they intend to venture into the galaxy to seek the truth for themselves, believing only upon witnessing tangible evidence. However, for the moment, they must accompany the observer and remain under the protection of the benevolent shelter while awaiting uplifting news regarding the cordyceps affliction. During a brief respite, having distanced themselves from the oppressive presence of the observer from the Lost Empire, these dignitaries seized the precious opportunity to peruse the latest news from the galaxy. the timeliness of information can lead to discrepancies. Thus, every aspiring individual must not overlook trending topics, a practice that has become second nature even for these diplomatic envoys. Soon, they were inundated with a singular, remarkable announcement, a declaration of war against the cordyceps disease issued by the Hive-Lost Empire. Of course, Pressorin merely uttered 3 sentences. They were yet unaware of the procedural intricacies involved in declaring war. This proclamation was a fabrication crafted by a group of well-meaning individuals, embellished into an elaborate narrative spanning thousands of words. Though most recognized its fictitious nature, the eloquence of the war declaration painted a heart-wrenching epic, garnering much admiration. Even Pressorin himself was unaware of the historical grievances they had with the cordyceps affliction. Nevertheless, such literary endeavors held little interest for the dignitaries of these sheltered civilizations. They were far more concerned with the implications lurking behind this event. The unexpected counteroffensive by the Lost Empire raised questions. Would the formidable cordyceps disease continue to pose such a daunting challenge? Pressorin demonstrated an overwhelming effectiveness in combating the affliction, as these fearsome yet remarkably peaceful entities stood as a natural predator to the biologically frail cordyceps fleets. According to the known records of the galaxy, Pressorin boasted an astonishing casualty ratio of 1:10,000 against the cordyceps. Remarkably, this solitary loss was not due to the disease itself, but rather an unfortunate incident where a Pressorin warrior choked on an excess of fungi and had to be evacuated as a casualty. In reality, they faced the cordyceps with 0 losses, as even the mythic cordyceps entities posed no threat to them. At this juncture, the cordyceps disease ravaging the galaxy appears to be on the verge of retreat, should Pressorin and the other civilizations succeed in a thorough eradication. This may indeed mark the final chapter of the cordyceps plight. The dignitaries remained silent, pondering the implications of the situation in their hearts. Their choice to accept the sanctuary offered by the benevolent protector stemmed from a profound fear of the cordyceps disease. Moreover, they harbored aspirations of swiftly establishing themselves in the future decayed galaxy, aiming to ascend to the forefront. If other galactic civilizations succumbed to the cordyceps disease, these sparks of life might emerge as the new leaders in the ensuing cycle. However, the realization of this future hinged upon their true status as sparks. Should the cordyceps disease be resolved, their civilization, having made the most prudent choice at a critical juncture, would not face reckoning. Yet their diplomatic influence would undoubtedly suffer a significant blow. The Galactic Chronicle, Chronicles of the Star Sea, recounts a historic conflict between 2 major factions within the galaxy. This war was ignited by friction and animosity among galactic civilizations, lacking the ancient grievances of the Lost Empire, yet it still culminated in a galactic war. Among the participants was a civilization once burdened with high expectations from the previous war's victory. However, astonishingly, they surrendered within mere months of the onset of hostilities. Though their faction ultimately triumphed in the galactic conflict, the civilization that capitulated at light speed faced relentless mockery, with many emerging civilizations remembering this incident. As a consequence of losing their diplomatic clout, this civilization garnered no advantages in the post-war resource distribution and soon became subservient to another formidable power due to their diplomatic weakness. While this incident may have gradually faded from the collective memory of the galaxy, it would resurface given the right circumstances, at which point those civilizations that had not resisted the cordyceps disease would lose all diplomatic authority, becoming the subject of ridicule for centuries to come. However, regardless of the outcome, it no longer concerned them. Upon choosing to accept sanctuary, they could only await the decision of their benevolent protector. After a period of contemplation, the dignitaries reflected on their circumstances and ceased to dwell excessively on the matter. Had they not accepted the sanctuary, it would have been one thing. Yet, since they had, any speculative behavior was unequivocally prohibited, which fallen empire would allow individuals to come and go as they pleased. They could only hope that the benevolent protector would, true to their name, compassionately release them, thus allowing them to seize the last opportunity amidst the lingering aftermath of the cordyceps disease. End of chapter 150. The Exterminator of Civilizations. Regrettably, our original plan has completely failed, just as we had foreseen. Unexpected events are a natural part of the galaxy. Such occurrences are to be expected, as our predictions had suggested similar scenarios, albeit with a probability not exceeding 0. 1. The Presolans? They truly are an unforeseen adversary. The emergence of the Presolans took the benevolent protector by surprise. The seemingly amiable outer empire, beneath its facade, harbors an attitude of utmost arrogance, oblivious even to the emergence of the Presolaran. The so-called galactic affairs, in their eyes, are mere heaps of trivial information, only occasionally piquing their interest when the feeble civilizations conjure something of note. This disdain is evident in their perception of the conflict between the Watchers and the Wanderers. They regard the fierce struggle between these 2 opposing civilizations as nothing more than childish quarrels, particularly when both the Watchers and the Wanderers assert their status as successors to the Harbingers. The observers can hardly suppress their laughter. Such arrogance, rooted in the belief of being the rightful heirs to the Harbingers, runs deep within their essence. In a galaxy devoid of dominion, they consider themselves the new generation of Harbingers. Their acts of aiding indigenous species and collecting rare organisms are but mere attempts to mirror the image of the harbingers. They perceive the cosmos through a lens of inequality. Their seemingly fervent gazes are, in truth, filled with condescension. The rescued and assisted species are often regarded as pets, and of lesser value at that. They bestow preferential treatment upon certain species based on whim, while turning a blind eye to the struggles and tragic demises of others. They see themselves as divine rulers, offering pity to this galaxy, hence granting these beings a sanctuary. Yet, their divine stature must remain unblemished. Thus, they aspire to emulate the gods, observing the grand drama of the galaxy from afar. They do not perceive themselves as peers to other civilizations. They will forever remain the overseers of all existence. Were they to remain mere spectators, it might suffice. But their sense of superiority compels them to manifest divine miracles to satiate their own desires. Consequently, they do not always observe. At times, they assert their dominance, relishing the awe, shock, and admiration from other civilizations, a recurring theme in their historical records. Upon grasping what they believe to be the truth of the universe, the divine compassion inherent in their godlike nature once again permeates their thoughts. They may never fully replicate the great achievements of the harbingers. Yet the inception of a new legacy is their aspiration. They deem it a miraculous feat for the entire galaxy to embrace the truth, one that rivals the deeds of the harbingers. As the second harbingers, they are determined to accomplish this, whether through deception or coercive means. Thus, the contingency plan is set in motion. Since these nascent civilizations refuse to gently embrace the truth, they must resort to more brutal methods. They certainly fail to comprehend, even in the presence of evidence. Just as in the countless experiments we have conducted, even when aware it is but a dream, many remain unwilling to awaken. For them, the dream is the essence of reality. Indeed, in the end, it seems we must rely upon ourselves. Ultimately, the esteemed benevolent patrons gathered together resolved to abandon their gentle methods of guiding the civilizations of the galaxy. That was their final act of compassion. Now, they chose to relinquish this divine mercy and instead invoke divine wrath to awaken the world. The scene shifts back to the tour group within the Sanctuary Ring world, where the observer, struck by inspiration, did not terminate their journey for a break, but rather resumed it after a brief intermission. The dignitaries of the sheltered civilizations dared not voice any dissent regarding this matter, even if they perceived it as a waste of time. This was the price they paid for the protection of the lost empire. Even their leaders paled in comparison to this seemingly ordinary benevolent observer. Yet at least, they found solace in the assurance of their safety and patiently listened to the observer recount tales. Where was I? Ah, yes, the Skavenblight fungi, if I recall correctly. The observer's thoughts danced as he spoke, despite having just been discussing a form of crystalline life. However, no one called out this inconsistency. All merely nodded in agreement. Speaking of such fungi, it compels a mention of an experiment we conducted long ago. At that time, we endeavored to emulate the progenitors, striving to create unique forms of life. Progenitors, you know? Ah, I see you are familiar. Fungi became our primary choice, for pure fungal civilizations already existed within the galaxy, and we aspired to forge a distinctive fungal civilization. Thus, the decomposition characteristics of the Skavenblight fungi inspired us to envision a peculiar civilization composed entirely of fungi, mimicking existence through corpses. Originally, the dignitaries silently recorded the observer's exposition, cognizant that insights from a member of the Lost Empire might yield unexpected benefits. However, the more they listened, the stronger the sense of déjà vu became, as if they had heard this narrative not long ago. This sense of familiarity was initially attributed to the observer's recounting, reminiscent of his repetition of the progenitor's tale more than 10 times. Yet soon, multiple dignitaries experienced a sudden shiver, their countenances shifting dramatically, prompting them to lower their heads quickly, lest others glimpse their expressions. This subtle movement was executed discreetly, but all were seasoned figures in the political arena, accustomed to keenly observing their surroundings. Others noted this detail, and recalling the benevolent observer's demeanor, they too displayed expressions of shock and mimicked the same action. However, our technology was still in its infancy, despite having obliterated 3 indigenous civilizations. We had yet to successfully create the sentient necrobiotic fungi, an amalgamation of corpses and fungi. The Skavenblight fungi consistently failed to yield intelligence. Even after studying the sentient fungal entities of approximately half an indigenous civilization, we still found ourselves devoid of the results we sought. The mysteries of life appeared to remain an insurmountable barrier before us. In the end, this fungus is employed by us to address the corpses that permeate space, as well as the civilizations that have perished in various mishaps. The concept of waste repurposing is indeed wondrous, is it not? Until now, we have been compelled to inquire. Are you listening? The observer's abrupt question caused the dignitaries, who were incessantly communicating with the civilizations behind them, to lift their gazes, striving to maintain serene expressions that betrayed an undeniable tension and fear. Alas, I knew you were not truly listening. Why dwell on such trivial matters? Do you not realize how fortunate you are? You are among those who are privileged to perish under our gentle care. in stark contrast to those in the outside world who must endure the harshness of reality. Listening to these fervent and compassionate words, the dignitaries could no longer contain themselves and began to tremble. At this moment, the civilizations battling the cordyceps plague finally recognized the absurdity of their previously perceived unexpected foe. They had thought that Pressoran was a surprising adversary to the rampant cordyceps plague, yet now they experienced firsthand the sensation of encountering an unexpected enemy. A message from the benevolent benefactor disrupted their momentum and delivered a significant shock. Poor little creatures. Your indomitable spirit of resistance is so profound that we are compelled to reevaluate our perceptions. However, this is where it ends, regrettably. You are unwilling to accept our gentle embrace. Is it because we have not been sufficiently amicable? Or have we failed to meet your expectations? The Skaven fungus, which you refer to as the cordyceps plague, has not defeated you. Rather, it has rendered you even more formidable. We must concede that the observers, having watched for so long, were mistaken. In light of your resilience, we have decided to abandon our long-standing policy of reformation. Though this decision is sorrowful, it is necessary. Thus, we shall now proceed to eradicate you. Initially, this announcement filled the galactic civilizations with bewilderment, prompting the stellar community to repeatedly inquire about its meaning from the benevolent benefactor. Yet, the benefactor offered no response, as if they had severed all external communications the moment the announcement was made, entering a peculiar state. Subsequently, reports of numerous civilizations being besieged by unidentified fleets flooded the galaxy. To be precise, these were not unidentified fleets. The design and attack patterns of the warships confirmed that they belonged to the benevolent benefactor, the fleet of this fallen empire that had once observed them. However, no one believed this to be the case. They speculated whether some internal anomaly had occurred within the benevolent benefactor, leading to such circumstances. In this moment, they exhibited an unwarranted naivety, as if the amiable fallen empire were still beckoning to them. It was only when the leader of the Spark Alliance arrived at the headquarters of the stellar community, personally delivering a message from the sanctuary ring world, that the galactic civilizations comprehended the gravity of the situation. In the sanctuary known as the Rim World, regarded as the last bastion of civilization, horrific events are unfolding. The benevolent rescuers have begun to exploit a byproduct of their research on the Skaven fungal spores, which possess the ability to control living beings, to manipulate the sheltered populace on a grand scale. Caught unawares, these strongholds of civilization have fallen completely. Just before the impending doom, the ships of the Spark Alliance, which had been hovering near the Rim World, received critical internal information. Although this vessel was ultimately destroyed by the suddenly deranged rescuers, it managed to relay invaluable intelligence back to the home planet. The galactic civilizations finally discerned the true intent of the long-lost empire that had persistently urged them to seek refuge. They wished for a sufficient number of galactic beings to simultaneously commit suicide in order to escape their virtual existence. Such an incomprehensible act ignited turmoil across the galaxy, yet the hostility of the rescuers had become irrevocable. Within the star maps, the once white blocks representing the rescuers transformed to red, alongside the crimson patches of the cordyceps disease. This signified their recognition as enemies by the galactic community. Henceforth, they were no longer referred to as rescuers. They had acquired a more fitting moniker, Civilization Annihilators. Ultimately, a plethora of discussions was silenced by the Spark Alliance, a civilization that had always regarded the observers as paragons, as they presented a new proposition, Catastrophe Designation, Civilization Annihilators. Chapter complete. Chapter 151. The path widened. The clarion call of a prolonged war seems to resonate throughout the galaxy. With the Catastrophe Designation, this unprecedented authority of the galactic community was presented in the form of a proposition for the first time. The civilizations finally recognized that the once amicable observers had vanished irretrievably, and the rescuers, who appeared to embody the guardianship of the galaxy, were merely masquerading for a nefarious scheme. The Catastrophe Designation, as stipulated in the Community Oath Program following the establishment of the galactic community, grants a special right belonging to the community. Any member may propose a resolution designating a particular civilization within the galaxy as a catastrophe, subject to a vote by other civilizations for approval. If the proposal passes, the designated civilization will be subjected to a total war by all members of the galactic community under the pretext of eradicating the catastrophe. This war will not cease with the annihilation of any participating civilization. It can only be halted through a vote by the galactic community to rescind the catastrophe designation or if the catastrophe is resolved. This unique right had gone unheeded since its inception. To be designated as a catastrophe and subsequently approved, a civilization must be exceedingly unpopular. Even the devouring swarm, an exterminating regime within the galaxy, had never attained the dubious honor of being designated a catastrophe, for it was not deemed catastrophic enough by galactic standards. Everyone believed that there would never come a day when this right would be necessary, yet the Ember Alliance has stirred their consciousness. Is the Lost Empire not a civilization? If they desire to annihilate all, then the Lost Empire, possessing powers beyond the grasp of ordinary civilizations, could indeed be deemed a cataclysm. Presently, The scourge ravaging the galaxy comprises not only the blight of the worm fungus, but also the Lost Empire, known as the Civilization Exterminators. Perhaps it is no longer appropriate to refer to them as the Lost Empire. They ought to be called the Awakened Empire. When the long-extinct Watchers exhibited their first signs of unrest following the destruction of the sacred planet, a novel concept emerged within the galaxy. When the Lost Empire ceases to be lost, can they still be referred to as such? The term Lost Empire was a unique designation given by galactic civilizations to these ancient cultures that had fallen into stagnation, serving to distinguish them from others. Yet, when they awaken and seek to act, the label becomes rather unsuitable. Those lost empires that are now active must be differentiated from their dormant counterparts. The renaming of such awakened empires has been a subject of ongoing debate within the galaxy, with names like the Revitalized Empire, Awakened Empire, and Rebooted Empire, each reflecting the preferences of those who hope for a brighter future. Despite various interpretations, the term Awakened Empire, bolstered by its association with popular interstellar cinema, has gained widespread acceptance. Now, designated by the stellar community as a calamity, the Civilization Exterminators are the first true awakened empire to emerge in the wake of this nomenclature's resonance. They are expanding at an extraordinary pace, employing unconventional methods to exert control over all life forms encountered along their path, including indigenous civilizations. The previous stagnation and decline are but fleeting memories. What now confronts us is a fervent civilization on the path of revival. Regardless of their ultimate intentions, they are no longer shrouded in gloom, but have transformed into an awakened empire. Clearly, an unexpected adversary has arisen, and we must now contemplate how to navigate a path amidst the assault of two calamities. The question posed by the Stellar Alliance has become the paramount topic of discussion within the stellar community. This civilization, having grappled with the worm fungus due to an excess of stargates and consequently suffered defeat, chose not to seek refuge but rather destroyed the impending stargates and retreated to node star systems to continue their resistance. Although they have lost many vital stargate networks, the Stellar Alliance still wields considerable diplomatic weight within the community, and their concerns are indeed pressing. The worm fungus, which had lost all suspense following its emergence in Prezelin, perhaps prompted the benevolent refugees to unmask themselves and reveal their true nature as the Civilization Exterminators. A remark made by one representative plunged the assembly into silence. Even those who had previously doubted were now confronted with the undeniable truth. The perilous worm fungus was, in fact, a man-made calamity orchestrated by the Civilization Exterminators. The purpose seems to be luring us into voluntary submission, leading ultimately to our demise. Though this notion appears utterly implausible, reports from the sanctuary of the Rimworld suggest as much. Presently, the sole enigma perplexing all civilizations lies in the intentions of the civilizational annihilators. This awakened empire perceives our galaxy as a mere simulation, asserting that only through a sufficient number of simultaneous suicides can the fabric of this virtual cosmos be unraveled, allowing them to return to the realm of reality. Such a theory, devoid of any credible evidence, is met with skepticism. After all, compelling an entire populace to end their lives is a preposterous claim. It is difficult to comprehend what could have transformed the once compassionate benefactors into the diametrically opposed ideology of the civilizational annihilators. However, the pressing concern is not to ponder the reasons, but rather to devise a strategy. The civilizational annihilators instill terror, and we find ourselves at a loss against them. Yet perhaps we might emulate the involvement of the Prezelins in the conflict, drawing other lost empires into this fray. If the annihilators pursue expansion relentlessly, it is only a matter of time before they clash with other fallen empires. We are not yet at the end of our rope. Some recalled the Hive Lost Empire, which is currently decimating the Cordyceps plague, and contemplated dragging other lost empires into this struggle. After all, it seems more fitting for the fallen empires to confront the awakened empire rather than for our youthful civilizations to serve as adversaries. Yet against the elusive fleets of the civilizational annihilators, our only recourse is to preserve ourselves. Thus, let it begin. The leader of the Spark Alliance once again addressed the assembly. He had personally attended this gathering within the Starsea community and had designated the civilizational annihilators as a calamity. While we can still muster a semblance of resistance against the Cordyceps plague, we are utterly defenseless against the awakened empire. During our deliberations, new star systems fall into their grasp daily. They move with astonishing speed. We can only traverse through hyperspace lanes and stargates, while they can appear at will across the galaxy. This is the might of the awakened empire. Even if we were to unite in purpose, we would still be incapable of confronting such an adversary. The leader of the Spark Alliance surveyed the assembly and continued. It must be acknowledged that this is their era. We have yet to earn our place. Our only course is to flee, to conceal ourselves, and to preserve the spark of our existence until the day of civilization's rebirth. This may well be our final meeting. This headquarters cannot escape becoming a target for the civilizational annihilators. After this, we shall be left to fend for ourselves, unlikely to reconvene. As he spoke, he produced a staff from his possession and cast it into the air. As the staff spun, it fell to the ground, yet remarkably remained upright, swaying momentarily, but ultimately refusing to topple. This is our ancient divination tradition, now largely disbelieved. Yet, according to the augury, it signifies that we shall not fall easily. The leader of the Spark Alliance took a deep breath and addressed the representatives of various civilizations around him. I am aware that many of you have harbored disdain towards us. I acknowledge that our words have often been harsh and have caused you considerable distress. Nevertheless, I must express that it is my greatest fortune to encounter you. I am delighted to discover that this universe is not as desolate and cold as we had imagined. Each time I encounter a new civilization in the vastness of space, I celebrate their ascension onto this grand stage with genuine joy. This crisis has not driven us apart. Rather, it has drawn us closer together. Even though this predicament may be insurmountable, I still hold hope. His gaze swept over each representative, as though etching their presence and the civilizations they represented into his memory. I wish for your figures to remain visible on the galactic stage in the future. With these words, the leader of the Spark Alliance resolutely turned and departed from the crowded conference room. The representatives remained momentarily stunned by his declarations, rendered speechless. The longer they lingered, the greater the likelihood of being targeted by the Annihilator's fleet. One individual rose, prompting the others to hastily follow suit, yet each paused to manipulate the instruments before their departure. Eventually, the conference room stood empty, save for the final representative who lingered. He too was on the verge of leaving, but before doing so, he approached the central position of the room, designated for determining the passage of proposals. Typically, an executor would be present to tally votes and, under the watchful eyes of all, follow a complex decryption procedure before pressing the confirmation button for the proposal's approval. However, this time, the lock at this location inexplicably opened by itself. Such an occurrence had only happened once in the history of the Starseed community, when the Guardians proposed the establishment of the Pan-Galactic trade market, which was unanimously approved. Now a second instance had arrived. Among the 4 seats required for the establishment of the Starseed Council, one final position remained undecided, with this topic perpetually lingering on the agenda, often consuming considerable time in deliberation. The Spark Alliance achieved a remarkable 100 approval rate, resulting in the unlocking of the proposal, leaving only the final confirmation to be executed. The last remaining representative surveyed the now empty, yet seemingly crowded, conference room and pressed the confirmation button. Just as the leader of the Spark Alliance had articulated, they would not falter. They would ensure that this proposal would proceed in the future. Chapter 152. The path narrowed. The perilous Annihilators commenced a full-scale war against the entire galaxy. They offered no explanation for their declaration of war, nor did they fabricate any pretext for conflict. They merely informed the other civilizations of their intent to obliterate them before launching their assault. Prior to this revelation, the galactic civilizations had learned through the messages disseminated by the sanctuary ring worlds that the rampant blight known as the parasitic plague was, in fact, a creation of the civilization Annihilators. Their strategy was one of deception, with one acting as the benevolent figure and the other as the malevolent, luring the galactic civilizations into their grasp. Now, the truth has been laid bare. They no longer conceal their intentions, transforming from merciful refuge givers into ruthless exterminators. Indigenous civilizations have already fallen victim to their malevolence. The naive natives, still unacquainted with the vastness of the cosmos, need not suffer direct assaults. Merely by dispersing parasitic spores across the planets, they can seize control of entire native civilizations. Their objective transcends mere destruction. They seek to accomplish specific tasks within designated time frames, necessitating these complex methods to ensure outcomes align with their designs. Across the galaxy, fleets from the civilization Annihilators are launching assaults, and those utilizing jump engines to ravage the unsuspecting natives perceive no injustice in their actions. Although all galactic civilizations are regarded as mere natives in their eyes, regardless of their celestial aspirations, they believe that as harbingers of apocalypse, they must wield divine retribution to shatter the resolve of these civilizations. Much like elephants disregard the protests of ants, they attack other civilizations with impunity, achieving remarkable expansion efficiency, staining the galactic map crimson. At this moment, on the cradle of the Annihilator's homeworld, a multitude of individuals is laboring to transport a prized instrument. It is a compact sphere, appearing as a dull, unevenly gleaming iron ball, devoid of any technological sophistication. Yet, this is the treasure of the civilization Annihilators, a testament to their status as the rightful heirs of the Harbingers. They have named it the reality-penetrating device, believing it grants them insight into the truth of existence. They are convinced that the Harbingers must have devoted the full might of their nation to construct this instrument as a warning to humanity, before choosing to depart from this world through self-destruction. This is the irrefutable theory they have derived from countless experiments, and they are certain of its validity. Those pitiable creatures continue to resist, and the creators of this virtual realm are deemed despicable, ensnaring these souls in a splendid nightmare from which they can never escape. A senior member of the civilization Annihilators once again expressed his sorrowful reflections, lamenting their plight. Over prolonged epochs, embracing reality has morphed into their fervent faith, a zealotry that surpasses even that of the Watchers, warping their cognition. This distorted mindset, coupled with an extreme arrogance, led the civilization annihilators to decide upon a collective self-destruction alongside others. In their perspective, this was entirely a benevolent act, utterly disregarding the desires of other civilizations, forcibly imposing this fate upon every civilization. They are the harbingers, the deities. Determining the life and death of all is their prerogative, and liberating everyone from suffering is deemed their sacred duty. It matters not. They shall come to recognize the disparity. We are now poised to once again activate the reality aperture, allowing the blinded civilizations a glimpse of the truth. Another high-ranking official gazed as the reality aperture was transported to a designated location upon the cradle, undergoing a series of meticulous adjustments. This relic of the harbingers possesses a labyrinthine method of operation and specific activation conditions, requiring even them considerable time to prepare. Have we not awaited this day for an eternity? The prospect of surpassing the achievements of the harbingers sends shivers down one's spine. They believe they are on the verge of accomplishing what even the harbingers could not, liberating other beings in the galaxy from the confines of the virtual realm. This sense of pride, honor, and the intoxicating feeling of being revered by all invigorates them profoundly. Indeed, it is a necessary decision to realize this monumental endeavor. They trust that when this day arrives, understanding will dawn upon them. Although the commencement of the reality aperture's activation requires further time, it does not hinder their flights of fancy. They have never contemplated the aftermath of their own demise, nor have they ever considered whether the harbingers truly cannot achieve such a grand feat in this moment. They resemble fervent zealots, blindly pursuing what they believe to be a noble cause, indifferent to the gazes surrounding them, relentlessly advancing towards an indistinct terminus. Yet, will that terminus be a paradise or a hell from which there is no escape? It is time to depart and observe the struggles of those little beings. Perhaps a grand spectacle is needed to herald the arrival of truth. The high-ranking officials engaged in animated discussions before departing. The reality aperture has been positioned suitably and is undergoing its final calibrations. Everything seems to be progressing favorably, and they have, after a long absence, resumed their original vocation of observation. They turned their gaze towards a civilization reminiscent of their former selves, one that has persistently resisted their teachings and has struggled the most fervently. Was it called the Coalition of Sparks? Their tenacity is indeed commendable. Had it not been for their continuous attempts to solicit aid from several, shall we say, lost empires? What a peculiar designation. Had they not sought assistance from those lost empires, we might not have even noticed them. A high-ranking member of the civilization annihilators observed the fragmented wreckage of warships on the screen with keen interest, occasionally offering commentary. Their fleet was decimating those unyielding civilizations at an extraordinary pace, with several civilizations already obliterated. However, those civilizations had preemptively evacuated the majority of their populace onto transport ships, engaging in a game of hide-and-seek, and thus far, they remain undiscovered. Though they are assailing these fledgling civilizations, the other lost empires are not among their targets. It is not out of fear. The arrogant civilization annihilators still believe themselves to be the pinnacle of civilization, with no other civilization capable of rivaling them. Those lost empires regarded as their equals by the galactic civilizations are, in their eyes, merely a collection of more robust ants. The most significant point lies in their perception that these lost empires serve no purpose whatsoever. The principal species of the so-called guardians, coordinators, and wanderers is a collective of robots, which, in their theoretical framework, are essentially artificial intelligences from a virtual realm, whose self-destruction would bear no consequences. As for the Presolans, they believe that the population of these beings is woefully insufficient to have any impact, rendering their existence inconsequential. Thus, until now, it is quite remarkable that they have fortuitously avoided conflict with any lost empires. As the civilization annihilators observed, their gaze turned towards the home planet of the Spark Alliance. They had already lost 75% of their territory, yet they gathered all remaining inhabitants on their home world. This was a choice made out of desperation. They remained oblivious to why the civilization annihilators took such a keen interest in them, having preemptively severed their avenues of escape, preventing them from rallying the Sparks, seemingly intent on making them the first civilization to be forcibly subdued. Recognizing the inevitability of their demise, the Spark Alliance resolved to inflict one last act of defiance against the civilization annihilators. Their fury over the fall from grace of their once revered exemplar had transformed their veneration into profound hatred. The deeper the love, the sharper the hate. They prepared to end their lives, ensuring that this awakening empire would gain nothing from their demise. Contrary to the Gestalt consciousness, which typically embodies a singular thought, it is indeed natural for individuals to harbor differing sentiments, and it is not unusual for some to resist such a drastic choice. Yet, the reality unfolded in an unexpected manner. The remnants of planet-buster bombs, once wielded by the civilization annihilators to obliterate indigenous populations, had been reverse-engineered by them, and similar devices were now positioned on their home planet. They awaited the approach of the civilization annihilators' fleet to detonate the bombs, intending to demonstrate the resilience of life to this awakened empire. The activation mechanism for the bomb had been entrusted to the leader of the Spark Alliance, who had garnered the trust of the populace, placing their fate in his hands. At this juncture, The fleet of the civilization annihilators had arrived in the star system and commenced its advance towards the home planet of the Spark Alliance. However, the leader refrained from immediately triggering the bomb, remaining silent and seemingly awaiting something. The surrounding officers, witnessing the ever-approaching signals of the civilization annihilator's fleet, grew increasingly anxious, frequently glancing at the leader, eager to discern the reason for his inaction. The anticipation of death was an uncomfortable sensation. They yearned for an explosive finale to their lives. Yet, the leader maintained his composure, and just as the fleet was on the verge of reaching their home planet, he suddenly displayed a relieved smile. A powerful and familiar signal enveloped the galaxy, reminiscent of an experience they had long since encountered. The Spark Alliance naturally received this signal, but without needing to look. The leader knew precisely its origin. Their civilization's journey has been fraught with misfortune. Upon their ascension into the cosmos, they found themselves born beside the silent, a race acutely sensitive to border disputes, and soon fell victim to devastating warfare. After a difficult struggle to restore their nation, they became the target of disdain from numerous civilizations due to their fiery rhetoric. They once joyously dismantled the barriers of a planet, only to be scolded by the civilization within, and embarrassingly, they were unable to reclaim their dignity. The natural reserves they painstakingly developed were obliterated by the sudden emergence of the Presolans, rendering their substantial investments mere illusions. The civilization they revered as a paragon callously betrayed their faith, even threatening to strike them first. Their lives have been marked by perpetual misfortune, culminating in a glorious sacrifice that seemingly brought closure to their civilization. Yet, the leader of the Spark Alliance remained steadfast in his belief that life would not always be so cruel, and that their endeavors would not be entirely in vain. Ultimately, he awaited the fulfillment of his hopes. Detected large-scale signs of decline within the Galactic civilization. The Guardian Protocol has been activated. Galactic threat confirmed. War policy is being enacted. Target, Civilization Annihilator. Status, threat neutralized. Notes, please avoid combat zones. Refugees should proceed to the following areas: Hatchery, Infinite Lighthouse, Delta Sanctuary. Super Invincible Absolutely Reliable Nanosmart Retirement Home. As the signal spread throughout the galaxy, the once feared fleet that had resolved the ring crisis re-emerged into public view. The mother planet of the Spark Alliance also witnessed the arrival of a fleet distinct from the civilization annihilators. They appeared more ancient, yet emanated a profound sense of solace. Chapter 153, Galactic Guardians. The Guardians have taken action. The enigmatic fleet that vanquished the rings once again stood before the galactic threat, just as they had in the past. This occurrence seemed both unexpected and yet entirely reasonable. It was not only the Spark Alliance that recognized the uniqueness of this mechanical lost empire. Many civilizations keen on galactic affairs also discerned the Guardians' distinctiveness. This lost empire appeared to abstain from all galactic matters, with their only vocalization in the galaxy occurring during a farcical assembly within the Starseed community. During that inaugural galactic meeting, the participating civilizations were inexperienced, nearly resorting to physical confrontation. This situation ultimately attracted the Guardians' attention, who silenced them with a singular topic. It was only afterward that they belatedly realized the gravity of their actions, their faces burning with embarrassment, feeling akin to schoolchildren. Nevertheless, observations regarding the Guardians never ceased, even dredging up some long-standing grievances. All civilizations were intensely curious about the activities of this mechanical lost empire. The most striking impression the Guardians left on other civilizations was their myriad research vessels soaring throughout the galaxy, alongside their perpetually open borders. The errant research vessels may still be perceived as searching for something, yet the notion of an ostensibly open border diverges significantly from the experiences of all burgeoning civilizations, as well as any lost empires. It is essential to recognize that even when the observers were akin to distant, fallen empires, they never presumed to open their borders to other civilizations. This peculiar mechanical lost empire appears to possess a sense of benevolence that starkly contrasts with that of the observers. Meanwhile, the company known as Kyrie Bohuan, which claims to have a fruitful collaboration with the Guardians, soon found itself overwhelmed and became a fleeting sensation. However, it did not take long for other civilizations to realize that Kyrie Bohuan did not maintain the close ties with the Guardians as it had professed. Despite their incessant proclamations of being the pioneers, the reality spoke volumes. Recently emerged, the Servants of Paradise and the Galactic Kin, two intelligent mechanical civilizations, seem to enjoy a far more advantageous relationship with the Guardians. In summary, following the resolution of the Ring Crisis, the galactic civilizations began to harbor a peculiar respect for this enigmatic mechanical lost empire. They sensed they were beginning to comprehend the true significance of the name Guardians. If this were indeed the case, then venerating them alongside their ancestors might not be an insignificant act. Thus, amidst the rampant outbreak of the cordyceps disease, many civilizations in the galaxy instinctively questioned, what do the Guardians say? However, they quickly realized that such a mindset was untenable. Having endured 2 galactic crises, these civilizations understood that the galaxy was not as idyllic as it appeared. Threats capable of precipitating a civilizational reboot lurked at every turn. If they were to rely on the Guardians or other lost empires to resolve every crisis, what purpose would they serve? Anticipating that the lost empires would rise to the occasion could only be their last resort. They could not perpetually depend on the leniency of others. What if, one day, those formidable guardians were to fail? Even while recognizing the limits of their capabilities, they should strive to excel in their efforts, at the very least maintaining a proper attitude. Thus, in the face of the current cordyceps outbreak, the majority of galactic civilizations exhibited remarkable resilience, refusing to accept the shelter of the lost empires until the very end. Yet, it was evident that the civilization annihilator had concealed itself well, delivering a staggering surprise at a critical juncture. Now, they had reached a most precarious moment. The threat from the awakening empire had surpassed their threshold of endurance. This predicament could no longer be resolved through the sacrifices of a few or through desperate battles. Perhaps the conclusion of this crisis would see their obliteration. Nevertheless, the efforts of each civilization did not go unnoticed. When there are those who seek to exploit and harm the innocent, akin to children in a kindergarten, this figure, reminiscent of a parental guardian in the galaxy, would not remain passive. Hence, perseverance will ultimately yield rewards, will it not? The leader of the Fire Seed Alliance cast the detonation button into the sky, then, akin to a gunslinger, swiftly discharged his weapon to obliterate the device controlling the planetary bomb. His rise to prominence was not solely due to his reputation. He possessed nearly flawless qualities across various domains, making such sharpshooter actions second nature to him. However, despite his nonchalant demeanor, his aides harbored a more pessimistic outlook. Leader, do you truly place your trust in the Guardians? What if they are not foes? One expressed, concerned about the several detonators they had constructed and suggesting he procure a new one. The unease lingered, particularly in light of the 75 territory loss. This loss, merely a line in the reports, belied the countless efforts they considered valuable that had been ruthlessly crushed in the process. Their skepticism stemmed not from disbelief, but from a visceral understanding of their enemy's formidable strength, forged through personal experiences of despair. While the ring crisis was theoretically capable of inflicting far greater devastation than that wrought by the civilization annihilators, the Guardians had resolved it with such rapidity that many civilizations never truly confronted the rings. Even as they elevated their assessments of the Guardians, they found themselves at a disadvantage when juxtaposing these evaluations with their own lived experiences. This peculiar phenomenon often leads to a misperception. When a significant threat is effortlessly neutralized by others, those who have not encountered it firsthand may underestimate its severity. Consequently, the Guardians, despite their resolution of the ring crisis, held a relatively modest position on the entertainment-oriented ranking of comparative strength of galactic civilizations. The Lost Empire, a vanished entity known as the Silence, claimed the top spot, followed by the Awakening Empire, the civilization annihilators, with the Guardians relegated to third place. Although such rankings are merely the subjective opinions of enthusiasts, they wield considerable influence, as some revel in quantifying the strength of civilizations through arbitrary and often nonsensical criteria. For instance, the Fireseed Alliance languished near the bottom of this list, with evaluators failing to account for the significant impact of the indigenous civilizations intricately linked to them. In truth, since their emergence on the galactic stage, the Fireseed Alliance has consistently been the most prolific producer of scientists, even outpacing the technologically authoritarian Mingbo regime. Though still relatively young among interstellar civilizations, their technological prowess is nearing that of the first-tier civilizations, aside from the Lost Empire. What accounts for this? It is, of course, the vast number of indigenous civilizations they have educated, which periodically yield genuine geniuses who, under their guidance, swiftly ascend to become leading scientists, making substantial contributions to the realm of research and development. Furthermore, not all indigenous civilizations are feeble or powerless. The civilizational alliance of the Fireseed League, birthed alongside dragons, possesses not only hyperspace engines and a unified planetary system, but also bears an uncanny resemblance to certain primitive civilizations from the pre-space era. Yet to this day, no one dares to provoke them. Countless pirates have mysteriously vanished on the homeworld of this civilization, becoming mere remnants in the vastness of space. This civilization holds the penultimate position on the list, just above the Sijic civilization, which suffered a brutal beating for colonizing the sanctuary of the Watchers and has yet to recover. Observing the rankings is merely a source of amusement. True prestige is measured by tangible achievements. The leader of the Fireseed League, having anticipated the pessimistic sentiments among his aides, did not offer extensive explanations. Instead, he brewed himself a beverage and leisurely observed the information transmitted from the observation station, exuding an air of calm confidence. His sole concern had been whether the Guardians would react to the situation. However, he was assured that their involvement would lead to but one outcome. The others, noticing his serene demeanor, shared a mix of trepidation and anticipation as they turned their gaze to the unfolding scene in space. At the moment they began to watch, the fleet of the civilization annihilators launched their assault against the Guardians. A brief moment of chaos erupted at their command center upon the Guardians' response, but order was swiftly restored. Clad in their haughty arrogance, they prepared to crush this unexpected adversary with the same ease they displayed when dealing with fledgling civilizations, eager to assert their dominance. How many unexpected foes have they faced? The Prezelans were considered one, as were they, and now the Guardians themselves. After all, aren't they just a horde of robots? Watch as I drive them back with my warships. The flagship of the civilization annihilators, the Titan, aimed its Hellfire beam cannon at the peculiar, luminescent ships of the Guardians, ready to unleash destruction. This colossal weapon, exclusively mounted on the Titan flagship, possessed terrifying range and destructive power, capable of annihilating mythic creatures such as the space whale matriarch with a single shot in the hands of the Lost Empire. However, just as they believed they could obliterate the enemy flagship with one decisive strike, an astonishing event unfolded. A series of nearly undetectable weak signals seemed to have already infiltrated every ship within this star system, exerting their influence. In that moment, the warships of the civilization annihilators suffered a powerful, indiscriminate electronic assault, resulting in a multitude of errors within their sensors and combat computers. The Titan's main cannon, poised to fire, suddenly fell silent. The sensors could not detect the enemy, leading the ship's systems to conclude that energy should not be wasted. Thus, the once advanced ships of the civilization annihilators stood still, akin to a throng of vegetative beings, rendered immobile. This scene was undoubtedly staggering for the civilization annihilators and the Watching Spark Alliance. However, for Li Wenyuan, who was executing a threat engagement, this was anticipated. The outcome was quite satisfactory. It was not in vain that I had the sudden inspiration to apply it to naval warfare. Li Wenyuan gazed at a unique component he had installed aboard the Titan flagship, a satisfied expression gracing his face. Suppression position, ghost signal. Component, Titan auxiliary halo. Description, this is a product that applies the ghost signal to the realm of instant combat, in some aspects. It serves as an enhanced version of suppression position, electronic. The silent and swiftly infectious ghost signal enables us to infiltrate and dominate adversaries employing intelligent warfare. Even if their combat computers resemble antiquated systems, we can still achieve a certain degree of weakening, dragging the enemy into the domain of manual combat with which we are familiar. Special note, did you know? Artificial intelligence has grown weary. If organic beings decide to invade AI, on average, one AI would have to contend with 100,000 organic entities. You are unaware, you do not care. You only concern yourself. Therefore, no to artificial intelligence. Only manual combat. End of chapter 154. The path grows ever narrower once the civilization annihilators notified the galaxy of their decision. Li Wenyuan felt it was nearly time to take action. He remained oblivious to the intentions of the inexplicably deranged awakening empire that sought to drag everyone into a collective demise. Yet the damage they inflicted upon the galaxy had reached a threshold he could no longer ignore. Initially, he had considered that this entity seemed to be one of the earliest sparks left by humanity prior to their departure, still ensnared within the conflicts of the galaxy, thus not warranting his intervention. However, it became evident that this spark had dimmed, transforming into a ticking time bomb of a threat, intent on annihilating the entire galaxy. Any endeavor to obliterate the galaxy would not be permitted under his watch. Consequently, he did not hesitate to issue a galactic announcement and dispatched his fleet to every location afflicted by the civilization annihilators' assaults. Given the civilization annihilators had fractured numerous civilizations' territories, leaving many adrift among the stars, he included several refuge zones in his galactic announcement for safety considerations. Among these were the home system of Pressoran, the former home system of the Wanderers, a newly constructed ring world named Delta Sanctuary, and the retirement system crafted by the entity known as Grey Wind. The peculiarly named retirement system was something Grey Wind had emphasized repeatedly to him. When he inquired about the reasoning behind it, Grey Wind replied, "When we grow old, our parts rust, and we can no longer drink motor oil. Let us come here to spend our remaining days together." Setting aside the notion of when beings of their caliber and entire civilizations would ever experience aging, contemplating the idea of a nanite intelligence and a mechanical intelligence sharing their twilight years was, indeed, romantic in its own right. Although Li Wenyuan felt a profound sense of emotion, he believed that this was not the time to succumb to the inevitability of aging. The unparalleled and utterly reliable nano-intelligent retirement home galaxy lay nestled within a distant star cluster, a realm inaccessible by warp engines, serving as an impeccable sanctuary. After consulting with Grey Wind, she opened the borders as a coordinator, providing a temporary refuge for the galactic refugees. Her domain was entirely situated within the distant star cluster, ensuring that no matter where one found themselves within it, they would remain shielded from the threats posed by civilization exterminators. As for the other sanctuaries mentioned in his announcement, it was evident that they were civilized territories capable of resisting the exterminators. How the galactic civilizations would perceive their relationship thereafter was beyond Li Wenyuan's contemplation. Let them speculate as they wished. Having secured a retreat for the galactic civilizations, he turned his focus to the instigator of this threat, the civilization exterminator responsible for the pseudo-catastrophe of the cordyceps disease, a menace to the galaxy. Regardless of their past contributions, at this moment, they were nothing short of a malignant presence. This marked his inaugural engagement in warfare against a former fallen empire, now an awakened one. Previously, he had been a mere observer, watching the conflicts between the fallen empire and other civilizations unfold. despite having simulated countless scenarios in the virtual realm. Invariably achieving a flawless victory rate of 100, he approached the enemy with the fundamental respect they deserved. Even the Titan-class battleship had ventured near the exterminator's homeworld, poised to deliver a decisive blow at a critical juncture. In addition to the direct might of his fleet, he gleaned insights into the technology of the fallen empire through the Voyager. These stagnant civilizations possessed not only a rich heritage, but also technologies that ordinary civilizations lacked. This was their hubris, for they were indeed born superior. However, contrary to the demeanor typically associated with such arrogance, the civilization exterminators found themselves ensnared in chaos. What was amiss? Why did the operational capabilities and sensors of their vessels appear to fail? What had transpired? Within their command center, questions of this nature proliferated, with everyone pondering one singular issue: where were their ships? Out of a deep-seated instinct for self-preservation, these long-lived beings, much like the former Voyagers, had equipped all their vessels with advanced combat systems, yet almost none had any tangible targets to engage. Even though they were an awakened empire adept in genetic technology, artificial intelligence remained an indispensable facet of their existence. Though their technology was not yet on par with that of the Voyagers, they still found it effortless to dominate younger civilizations. Regrettably, one must question the wisdom of employing artificial intelligence in the presence of a mechanical fallen empire. The effects of the suppression stance, ghost signal, were unexpectedly effective. All the exterminator fleets intercepted by Li Wenyuan had now devolved into a fleet of aimless vessels. 23rd Battle Fleet. Respond to me. What are you doing? Process number 1. Annihilate the enemy's living forces. Excellent. Then proceed with abandon. Command invalid. Error code 0531. No hostile signal detected. What are you doing? Is the enemy not right before your eyes? Process number 12. Sensor malfunction. If the sensors are broken, repair them. Command invalid. Error code 0531. No hostile signal detected. The vessel will automatically return to the home port in 360 days. Sensor repair process. 360-0000. This dialogue transpired at the headquarters of the Civilizational Annihilators, a high-level exchange regarding the fleet. They had previously granted the fleet tremendous authority due to its formidable combat capabilities, which has now proven to be a grave misjudgment. The current predicament of the fleet is ensnared in a paradox. The imperative to eliminate the enemy is thwarted by the malfunctioning sensors that fail to detect the adversary, while the repair of the sensors is contingent upon being in a combat state to identify the enemy, or else it defaults to the futile cycle of returning to the home port for repairs. This predicament is a trivial flaw engendered by the immature technology of the Civilizational Annihilators, who, in their arrogance, have never deemed it worthy of attention. Their assaults on younger civilizations have masked this issue until they encountered the Guardians, where the impact of this minor flaw was magnified, rendering it a fatal weakness. Compelled by necessity, the higher-ups of the Civilizational Annihilators reluctantly unlocked the operational authority of the fleet through command, proceeding with remote operations. However, the signals in this war-torn universe have always been unreliable, and such remote combat operations are somewhat condescending. Consequently, they suffered a devastating loss ratio of 0.1000, nearly facing utter defeat. Realizing the dire situation, they hastily assembled a cadre of space military warriors, entrusting these hastily trained combatants with the operation of the vessels in battle. Yet, this choice was hardly sagacious. Having previously thrived on overpowering the weak, they now found themselves at the mercy of the same tactics. Li Wenyuan did not only equip the Titan flagship with a singular auxiliary halo, beyond the suppressive field, ghost signal. There exists another auxiliary component that had previously made an appearance on the Titan. Suppressive field, primordial fear, component, Titan auxiliary halo, description. This is a product developed after comprehensive research on the Presolans, essentially an enhanced version of the suppressive field, biological. We discovered that Presolans seem capable of invoking the most primal fears of living beings through unique biological signals, leading to uncontrollable physiological aberrations that cannot be resisted merely by steadfast will. Given that the scope of influence has been resolved, we can draw the enemy into the realm of artificial intelligence combat that we are familiar with. Special note: when the two suppressive fields combine, we may be able to draw the enemy into our familiar domain, as if it were no longer necessary. The arrogant Civilizational Annihilators have suffered another significant setback, as their space military warriors have become a quaking assembly of cowards. This time, they successfully achieved a battle loss ratio of 0.10000, a notable improvement over their previous performance. Ultimately, the frenzied leaders of the Civilization Annihilators resolved to once again employ their divine artifact, a relic from the Harbingers. This compact sphere possesses not merely the power to pierce reality, but rather, the ability to fulfill their original aspirations of transcending the mundane. This peculiar instrument, referred to as the reality-penetrating device, exhibits effects reminiscent of a wish-granting machine, akin to the experiments they conducted within indigenous civilizations after imitation. They believe that such a capacity to alter the very fabric of cosmic laws could only be realized by the Harbingers themselves. This time, they intended to make a wish. seeking the power sufficient to obliterate the mechanical lost empire. Chapter complete. Chapter 155. The so-called cycle. It is truly astonishing that such a formidable civilization could exist within this galaxy, rivaling even our own zenith. The upper echelons of the civilization annihilators engaged in fervent debate over the origins of the suddenly appeared guardian. They were, of course, aware of the existence of the mechanical lost empire, although this knowledge had only come to them recently. At that time, they gleaned through communications from the Ember Alliance that a secluded mechanical civilization still thrived within the galaxy, yet their arrogance led them to disregard this revelation. Naturally, they remained oblivious to the Guardian's past actions within the galaxy, even unaware of when the Ring Crisis had transpired. At that juncture, they were still referred to as observers, with all observation instruments focused on the indigenous civilizations they regarded as mere pets. Convinced of their status as the inheritors of the Harbingers, they did not fathom the possibility of a civilization stronger than their own existing in the galaxy, a deeply entrenched arrogance that often heralds the downfall of the mighty. Even now, they are reluctant to concede that the Guardian, which achieved that astounding battle-loss ratio of 0.10000, possesses far greater strength than they do. But that is where it ends. The mechanical civilization is indeed impressive, yet as long as it resides within this universe, they could never be our adversary. Another high-ranking member of the civilization annihilators passionately spoke of their ultimate strategy, fervently gazing at the reality-penetrating device, now installed within a colossal apparatus. This is their divine artifact, the supreme masterpiece left by the Harbingers. Upon initially discovering this enigmatic spherical instrument, they did not associate it with the Harbingers. Rather, they treated it as an ordinary relic for study. However, as their research progressed, they gradually unraveled some of the instrument's secrets. The primary power of this device lies in its ability to alter certain cosmic laws to a degree, even though this notion seems implausible. As if it were beyond the capabilities of any civilization in this galaxy, the civilization annihilators have empirically validated its effects. The impact of changing laws can only last for a fleeting moment, as the universe appears to swiftly revert to its original state. However, if wielded judiciously, it can yield effects akin to those of a wish-granting machine, despite the countless resources and prolonged preparation time required for each activation. The history of the Civilization Eradicator reveals only a handful of instances of its utilization. In those days, when it was still referred to as the Observer, the Civilization Eradicator, driven by curiosity, employed the device for the final time, eager to uncover the truth of the galaxy. It was then they discovered they were ensnared in a fabricated universe, trapped within its confines. The sense of societal collapse was fleeting. Soon after, their ideological perspective underwent a profound transformation. They resolutely believed there existed a means to escape this illusory realm, akin to the actions they attributed to the Harbinger. Consequently, the reality aperture was interpreted by them as a console within this virtual domain, for they could not fathom how it could yield such extraordinary effects otherwise. The sentient machines were conceptualized as the overseers of this virtual world, regulatory automatons left by its creators. They logically constructed a comprehensive theory of their virtual existence, venerating it as the ultimate truth and fervently executing their decisions to lead the denizens of the galaxy out of suffering. Little did they anticipate that the preparations intended to reveal the truth of the world to the populace would be utilized for such purposes. Some among the higher echelons lamented the activation of the reality aperture. If the original plan to shatter the virtual illusion were to be transformed into a crusade against the overseers, the time required for the next activation would be incalculable. Moreover, they would undoubtedly face even greater misunderstanding, as they had failed to present evidence to the galactic civilizations. Yet, there was no alternative. The peculiar sentient machines were unexpectedly formidable, and this was the only path to ensure the continuation of their scheme. Once all had expressed their sentiments, the reality aperture commenced its final activation procedures. The Civilization Eradicator had clarified their aspiration, not to wish for the destruction of the overseers, but rather to acquire the power sufficient to annihilate them. Even in this critical moment, their thoughts were consumed with reclaiming their dignity, seeking to demonstrate their superiority rather than directly eradicating the threat. The fleet of the Civilization Eradicator began to retract, their previously ravaging armada having been nearly decimated by the overseers, leaving only a few mobile fleets lingering on the periphery. Now, to afford the reality aperture the necessary time to activate, these fleets remained stationed at the galactic choke points, hoping to delay the overseers for a moment longer. Meanwhile, the galactic civilizations that had witnessed the might of the overseers silently elevated this mechanical fallen empire to an unspeakable echelon. On the homeworld of the Ember Alliance, the atmosphere had shifted from a previous resolve to despair to one of jubilation, as celebratory events erupted across the planet almost incessantly. Logically, such a half-hearted celebration should not transpire, for the conflict between the overseers and the Civilization Eradicator had yet to yield a definitive victor. However, it is evident to the discerning that one side holds the overwhelming advantage. The leader of the Fireseed Alliance has chosen not to reclaim the borders, opting instead for a 3-day national holiday. Leader, we have just re-established connections with the Starseed community, and, through them, have reached out to other civilizations within the galaxy. Unsurprisingly, the headquarters of the community suffered a devastating blow as the Civilization Annihilator launched a colossal assault on the massive space station, sealing it within a barrier of isolation. Nevertheless, the community managed to reconstruct a temporary headquarters in another star system and has been in contact with other civilizations, with us being among the last to connect. The diplomats of the Fireseed Alliance reported this news to their leader, accompanied by another piece of good news. It has been confirmed that the Civilization Annihilator has retreated. As you mentioned, the Guardians effortlessly obliterated those fleets that we were powerless against, akin to a parent disciplining a child. The leader of the Fireseed Alliance, who was finally enjoying a moment of relaxation, shifted comfortably in his seat, yet his first inquiry was, is there any civilization that has not made contact? Logically, we have inexplicably drawn the attention of the Civilization Annihilator. Other civilizations should have had the opportunity to escape. To this, the diplomat shook his head, stating, at present, every civilization has been fortunate enough to survive. Although some have lost all their territories, their refugee fleets have been detected in the safe zones, likely under the protection of those fallen empires. That is somewhat reassuring. While it seems a grand reunion exists only in our imaginations, we are fortunate to have reached this conclusion. The leader expressed genuine joy over this matter, and his smile was infectious, prompting others to join in. Feeling that achieving such a resolution amidst this galactic crisis was indeed commendable. However, amidst the laughter, someone recalled a troubling thought and remarked with a hint of sorrow, yet, those civilizations under the control of the Civilization Annihilator through fungal spores appear beyond salvation. Though they were proponents of surrender, they were deceived, and perhaps, in the aftermath of the Civilization Annihilator's destruction, numerous civilizations will meet their end alongside them. His words cast a pall over the gathering. The destruction of a civilization, merely a string of characters in a report, belied the countless lives that had undergone eons of evolution, now reduced to mere dust in history. In response, the leader of the Fireseed Alliance maintained a composed demeanor. It is natural to feel compassion, yet each must bear the consequences of their decisions. Speculation may occasionally prove beneficial, but it is not a reliable strategy. Every individual who chose to flee has shifted the burden of responsibility onto others. If they bear no cost, then to whom should those who fought valiantly lament their plight? Collective will, technological advancement, civilizational strength, discerning choices, and even fortune are all integral to the progression of civilization. That we still stand here while they have perished signifies that we have excelled in ways they did not. We must strive to better ourselves, learn from this, and continue moving forward. The leader spoke with fervor, revitalizing the spirits of those present, dispelling the previous melancholy and replacing it with enthusiasm. One individual inquired, Leader, shall we recover the fleets of the Civilization Annihilators that have been destroyed? Perhaps through reverse engineering the remnants, we could uncover the secrets of the lost empire. Indeed, we must recover them. Though his words were impassioned, the leader maintained a languid demeanor, merely retrieving a plan before him. The study of the remains of these lost warships had always been a rare opportunity. During the earlier conflict between the Watchers and the Wanderers, we gained not a morsel, and we cannot afford to miss this chance. However, we must wait until after the holiday. It is currently a time for rest, and there is no need for haste. I understand what you wish to express. Yet the formidable secrets of the lost empire contained within these remnants represent but a fraction. He surveyed the others, projecting scenes of the lost empire's warships in battle onto the venue, pointing them out for all to see. Research into these remnants has been ongoing in the galaxy for some time. Even if our standards are not exemplary, we can still discern some differences. I possess a research report from the technocratic dictatorship of Mingbo, which fortuitously obtained some debris during the last conflict between the Watchers and the Wanderers. The findings suggest that the technology of the Lost Empire's warships is fundamentally similar to our own. They may possess an extraordinary method of energy utilization, allowing their shields and cruising capabilities to far surpass ours. However, the weaponry they employed does not exhibit significant generational differences from our own, with some even being commonplace in the galaxy. Yet, why do the same weapons yield performance levels of 200, 300, or even 500 in the hands of the Lost Empire? This is the truth we must seek. As he spoke, the leader, facing the astonished expressions of those around him, revealed a secret previously uncovered by the stellar community in the legacy of the Silent Ones. Perhaps our understanding of the Lost Empire is not entirely accurate. They have not entirely faded away but have, through some mysterious cyclical method, continually reinforced themselves. The effects of this cycle may be minuscule, yet when compounded over time, they yield terrifying efficacy. Have you not always been curious as to why I am so certain that the Guardians will prevail? It is because I believe their cycle is far longer than that of other civilizations. End of chapter 156. You have made progress. Unlike the leisurely discussions within the Alliance of the Sparks, the fleet under Li Wenyu's command was advancing the annihilation of the civilization destroyers with extraordinary urgency. This was not born from a sense of threat that necessitated acceleration, but rather from a desire to witness what further surprises the civilization destroyers might unveil. Based on current experiences, it seems that all lost empires are somehow connected to humanity. He remained oblivious to the nature of the truth capable of awakening this forsaken empire into madness, compelling it to drag the galaxy into a shared demise. Yet, he sensed that it was undeniably intertwined with one of their clandestine secrets, a secret that tightened its grip upon him with increasing oppression, poised to unveil itself before his very eyes. At that moment, on the home planet of the civilization destroyers, only one final step remained to activate the reality aperture device. They were aware that the Guardian was still a hyperspace journey away from their home system, with the superluminal suppressor and the delaying fleets having done all they could to impede the Guardian's advance. Presently, only the last remaining elite fleet lingered within their home system. This fleet represented their hope for a turnaround. They intended to augment it with the reality aperture device and, in full view of the galactic civilizations, obliterate all Guardian fleets. The madness consuming them fueled a yearning to witness the expressions of despair on the faces of the galactic civilizations as their hopes were crushed. Here it comes, suddenly declared a high-ranking civilization destroyer. He was the supreme commander of all fleets, and the elite fleet stationed here was the last under his command. This fleet had been equipped with the most rudimentary combat systems, and having been subjected to a repressive stance, it had minimized its influence, allowing it to detect the approach of the Guardian fleets. It is time. We have awaited this moment for far too long. Let us hope those little ones do not succumb to collective despair. Another high-ranking official responsible for the activation bore a grim expression. He had never felt so stifled, and his only desire was to crush the Guardians with relentless fervor. As the sound of energy transmission resonated, the reality aperture device, enveloped in a crimson field, began to rotate slowly. Amidst the oscillations, an array of complex readings materialized on the operational interface. These readings represented the patterns that the reality aperture device could alter, with the one pertaining to glimpsing the truth prominently displayed. Yet now, they sought to engage other readings. Though they remained unaware of the precise capabilities of the reality aperture device, the scant records of previous activations had allowed them to glean some meanings from the readings. By combining various readings, they could achieve the desired effects post-wish. This time, the combination they chose was a cycle of 300 layers. This was their unique pride as the awakened empire, and it served as one of the pieces of evidence affirming their belief in being the rightful harbingers of the apocalypse. This extraordinary technology, which enabled their infinite advancement, was a legacy left to them by the harbingers, and they felt that only the harbingers could manifest such miracles. Over the long passage of time, they had expended countless efforts and energy to achieve a mere 10 layers of this cycle. Yet, throughout the process, they had unraveled numerous enigmas that had once plagued them and attained incredible rewards. They had thought they had reached the end. But the miracle of the harbingers revealed to them the terrifying concept of the endless. Even though the reality perforator could only sustain a fleeting pseudo-cycle, it was sufficient for them to obliterate the mechanical lost empire. Initially intending to interact with you as an ordinary individual, circumstances have compelled a change. Since you are so intent on obstructing us, allow us to demonstrate the might of the heralds. We are, indeed, the rightful heirs of the heralds. The high-ranking official of the civilization Annihilator wore a terrifying grin, his muscles quivering with anticipation across the galaxy. He had envisioned the destruction of the Guardians, and they would ascend as the heralds, revered by all living beings. The moment the reality perforator was activated, the entire galaxy seemed to momentarily halt. This suspension was imperceptible even to the most precise atomic clocks. However, Li Wenyuan's own atomic clock accurately advanced by 1 unit, as if untouched by the event. Yet, living beings instinctively sensed the anomaly. The leader of the Spark Alliance, who had been elaborating on their future plans, abruptly found his speech interrupted. Although his subsequent words continued in a coherent manner, they bore an unsettling dissonance. He paused, joining others in bewilderment as they surveyed their surroundings, uncertain of what had transpired. This peculiar interruption lasted but a brief moment, after which the universe resumed its course as if nothing had occurred. However, the consequential effects had already begun to manifest. The fleet of civilization annihilators appeared unchanged, yet the operators distinctly felt an indescribable surge of immense energy enveloping their vessels. Their shields and armor had attained a level of terrifying potency. They believed that even a direct collision with a star would inflict minimal damage. Moreover, the energy congregating in the main cannons of their vessels, now fully primed, had undergone a qualitative transformation. Previously, they required the aid of Titans to obliterate a planet. Yet now they felt confident that these main cannons could directly annihilate a star. Is this the taste of invincibility? Those warriors, who had been relentlessly oppressed since the onset of battle, even undergoing genetic modifications to eliminate waste organs to prevent chaos on the battlefield, felt an unprecedented sense of vengeance looming near. To restore the glory of the civilization annihilators is our solemn duty. Thus, Guardians, prepare to face our wrath. These warriors, eager for confrontation, gazed through enhanced sensors towards the location previously occupied by the Guardian fleet, ready to unleash their threats, only to be stunned by the bizarre scene before them. What were those? Their astonishment was mirrored not only in their expressions, but also among the high-ranking officials of the civilization annihilators, who gazed in disbelief at the strange spectacle transmitted from the sensors. What once belonged to the Guardian fleet was now a mass of indistinct, eerie mosaics. Referring to it as a mosaic is somewhat misleading. At least in Li Wenyuan's perspective, his spacecraft had not undergone any physical transformation. However, he did perceive anomalies. He was exceptionally attuned to the energy flow of every warship, and the irregularities had become strikingly apparent. The energy surrounding his vessel had multiplied exponentially, to the extent that it interfered with the normal functioning of the sensors, rendering them capable of detecting merely a mass of mosaic. Bolstered by this energy, the shield had taken on a tangible quality, obstructing the regular transmission of light, so that even to the naked eye, it appeared as a dazzling array of brilliant colors. The emergence of such anomalies was decidedly unusual, yet Li Wenyuan successfully identified their source. Through the Heavenly Veil warship, which had remained in subspace, he glimpsed the origin of this phenomenon, a dense sphere in operation, strikingly familiar, to the point that records existed within the database. Veil penetration device, prototype, description, a pitiable prototype that failed to reach mass production. Although claimed to be an instrument for testing the confidentiality of the veil, it is, in fact, a product of creation theory, capable of producing astonishingly powerful effects only in certain exceptional environments. Under ordinary circumstances, it merely exists as a rather useless small orb. The veil is already perfected. Please use with caution. Special note, protocol in effect. This content starkly contrasted with the data extracted from the Voyager S archives on the planet. Perhaps, as the record suggested, the veil penetration device documented in the archives was a record of lost items, while what he now possessed was the actual record of the device itself. What a twist of fate. The fortunate soul who had acquired this artifact was none other than the Civilization Annihilator. Though he had harbored certain suspicions regarding their actions, the realization left Li Wenyuan with a sense of ennui. Accompanying the records of this device were all the logs of the Civilization Annihilators during its use, including their spoken words. "You are the true harbingers of apocalypse." Upon hearing this phrase, he felt an urge to laugh. If humanity were aware of such an inept and arrogant successor, they would surely find it amusing. While he was reluctant to shatter their illusions, one must dream with some semblance of rationality. He commanded the fleet, temporarily augmented by the veil penetration device, to launch a final assault against the Civilization Annihilators. Meanwhile, the Civilization Annihilators found themselves engulfed in profound self-doubt, unable to muster a coherent resistance, and were swiftly obliterated. They had realized that those mosaic-like entities were, in fact, the Guardian fleet, enhanced to an unfathomable degree. The multiplicative effect, distinct from their enhancements, exhibited a powerful exponential growth. It was evident that the same effect of 300 layers of enhancement applied to the Guardians, who were significantly more formidable than themselves. This was an unprecedented occurrence for them. They had previously tested other civilizations' vessels, none of which were influenced by the reality aperture. At that time, they basked in the illusion of being the chosen ones, selected by the harbinger of destiny. However, this fantasy was ruthlessly shattered, as a once subconsciously denied suspicion resurfaced in their minds. Could it be that the Guardians were the civilization chosen by the harbinger, while they were merely a bunch of deluded fools, indulging in self-aggrandizement? Chapter 157. The curtain falls. It proved that their speculation was correct. They were indeed a group of self-deluded, self-satisfied fools. Considering that the Civilization Annihilators might utilize the aperture to execute even more astonishing feats, Li Wenyuan chose to destroy the machine controlling the aperture directly. The weaponry of one of his escort ships penetrated through layers of defense, breaching the planetary shield of the cradle and striking the machine that maintained the operation of the aperture. He refrained from using the battleships or titans, for the weaponry of these vessels, after being enhanced by the aperture, had reached an unfathomable level of power, potentially obliterating the entire cradle planet with a mere misfire. Thus, he resorted to employing a small fighter from an escort ship to accomplish this task. In an instant, those intricate mechanical constructs evaporated, leaving only a steaming crater in their wake, alongside the intact reality aperture that had fallen to the ground. This dense sphere possessed an unexpectedly robust protective capability, one that had been validated over extensive time. Even if the planet were to explode, it would remain unscathed. Yet, the activators belonging to the Civilization Annihilators were rather fragile. At the moment the operation ceased, the peculiar force enveloping the Guardians and the remnants of the Civilization Annihilators fleet dissipated. The fleet of the Civilization Annihilators reverted to a state of weakness, pitiful and helpless, reduced to a heap of space debris, its suppressive stance rendered futile. Conversely, the Guardians' fleet returned to normalcy from a bizarre mosaic state. Just as the Civilization Annihilators had speculated, the efficacy of the wish machine equally impacted the adversary, and the effect appeared to be significantly greater. Their long-anticipated, fantasized, and steadfastly believed status had suffered a severe blow. In this moment, devoid of a third observer, the Civilization Annihilators finally gained a sense of self-awareness. Their enduring pride was shattered completely, and only this stinging slap of reality could return them to the days of innocent wonder beneath the starry sky, when they were but weak natives. Even if they were reluctant to accept it, the truth stood as the ultimate evidence. Clearly, the Guardians, who had toyed with them from the very beginning, were the ordained presence of the Harbinger. The artifact they referred to as the reality aperture had a far more profound effect on the Guardians than on themselves. The unheard-of terror fleets could only be constructed by civilizations deemed worthy by the Harbinger. Yet, amidst their confusion, an unprecedented wave of fury surged forth. They did not regret their failure to assess the state of the galaxy, launching an offensive with their customary arrogance. Utterly oblivious to the existence of entities far more powerful than themselves, they harbored no remorse for unleashing the parasitic invasion upon the galaxy, intending for the galactic civilizations to share in their self-destruction through their heinous actions. Their anger was palpable, a seething resentment directed at the Harbinger for not selecting them, but instead choosing a cadre of robots ignorant of the world's truths. Their arrogance remained deeply ingrained in their lineage, gradually becoming entrenched in their souls over the passage of time. Perhaps even if humanity were to descend upon them and elucidate the reasons, they would only respond with a barrage of inquiries. How dare the Harbinger choose you? Mere shells of data, devoid of substance. A high-ranking annihilator of civilizations knelt in despair, crying out in anguish. His voice, strained and hoarse, resonated with profound indignation. He did not expect those controlling the warships to heed his words, merely seeking to vent his frustration. Alas, Li Wenyuan not only heard their lamentations but also perceived their expressions with remarkable clarity. The subspace sensors of the celestial warship meticulously monitored the conditions of the cradle planet from every conceivable angle, recording each air current and swirling mote of dust. Was there no room for reflection? Yet, it was foolish to expect a civilization so resolutely intent on dragging the galaxy into oblivion to harbor any feelings of regret. He shook his head, intending to initiate a gentle intervention to conclude the history of the civilization annihilators by relocating the colossal figure to this star system. However, he soon heard more voices from the annihilators, all lamenting. Why not us? We are but a step away from the truth. You wretched robots are the true scourge of the galaxy. The plight of the little beings of the galaxy was pitiful. They would be ensnared by this illusory world for an indeterminate future. Surely, there would be successors among us capable of leading them towards the genuine reality. These frenzied individuals had completely forsaken the will of their ancient heritage, a civilization existing solely to embrace the truth. Li Wenyuan, initially reluctant to engage in further discourse, reconsidered upon witnessing their fervor and decided to grant them an opportunity to comprehend the truth. He infiltrated the planetary network system, causing the grand screens that had been broadcasting impassioned speeches to transform into a void of darkness. Following this darkness, a multitude of characters emerged, illuminating the void. At first, the frenzied annihilators shouted in outrage, seemingly dismissive of Li Wenyuan's tactics. After all, they had fought for so long. How could they be swayed by such trivial manipulation? As the display of characters increased, the clamor of their voices gradually subsided, and the emotions reflected in their eyes underwent countless transformations, ultimately settling into silence. These characters were alien symbols to the galaxy, yet profoundly familiar to the harbingers of civilization's annihilation. They had encountered such inscriptions at the site of the aperture device, initially mistaking them for some form of symbolic religious sigils. However, as the secrets of the aperture device were unraveled, they learned that this formidable artifact originated from the progenitors, leading them to suspect that these so-called religious symbols might indeed represent the language of the progenitors. This realization held significant importance for them, as it suggested that they could glean insights into the language, customs, and societal structures of the progenitors through these characters, thereby unlocking further legacies of their creators. Yet, due to the exceedingly limited number of characters, comprehending their meanings proved elusive. Nevertheless, each member of the civilization's destroyers etched the shapes of these characters indelibly into their minds, hoping to swiftly recognize any similar symbols that might hint at a connection to the progenitors. Now, before them on the screen were characters they had become instinctively familiar with, their forms vividly and completely presented. Among them, 99 were unrecognizable, yet the remaining nearly identical characters sufficed for them to deduce their significance. With such a quantity of characters, deciphering the meaning of the progenitor language would not pose a significant challenge, thereby allowing them to draw closer to their creators. However, this also signified a deeper truth. How could there be heirs who remained ignorant of the language of their predecessors? Their self-proclaimed lineage to the progenitors had been thoroughly shattered. If they had previously deluded themselves by blaming the aperture device for their ignorance, they could no longer evade their true identity. Unlike the previous frenzy, the removal of the veil of identity did not incite rage or lead to self-deception through resignation. Instead, each individual among the civilization's destroyers fell into a contemplative quietude, diligently perusing the translations accompanying the progenitor text on the screen. These translations contain portions of the theory of the veil, a theory characterized by its intricate models and descriptions, from which Li Wenyuan had selectively extracted the essential elements for clarity. Among these was a proposed direction referred to as the Veil Project, aimed at enveloping the entire galaxy under the protection of the veil, with a facade of a false galaxy outside, as stipulated by the theory of the veil. Indeed, when Li Wenyuan discerned that the civilization's destroyers had fortuitously stumbled upon the aperture device, He had a lingering suspicion as to why this civilization had suddenly abandoned its benevolent demeanor and descended into madness. Initially, he struggled to comprehend how a civilization could embrace such a fantastical notion as believing that the external galaxy was indeed real, detached from their own reality. However, upon witnessing the civilization's annihilator, honed over millennia, he came to understand that this civilization existed solely for one singular purpose: to accomplish a feat greater than that of the harbingers of doom. They were oblivious to the specific function of the shroud, yet they believed it to be a prison, firmly convinced that collective self-destruction was the key to liberation. What could possibly be more magnificent than the endeavor of the harbingers? Undoubtedly, it was leading the entire galaxy out of this confinement. But was the shroud truly a prison? The words on the large screen appeared swiftly, only to vanish just as quickly. The screen, post-invasion, did not revert to its previous rousing rhetoric but remained shrouded in darkness. Nevertheless, the conveyed content was sufficient for the civilization's annihilator to grasp a crucial truth. Perhaps they had erred from the outset. The shroud was not a prison but a protector. Following the shattering of orthodoxy, the next to fracture was the very goal that had driven them forward. Their civilization had woven this objective into the very fabric of their souls, and with this fracture, their path as a civilization would reach its conclusion. But it was impossible. With a cry, the leader of the annihilators erupted, transmitting his voice through the planetary loudspeakers to every individual. Our actions will undoubtedly not falter. Even if no one understands us, we shall steadfastly advance. His voice resonated with fervor, momentarily reviving the populace whose spirits had been shattered, igniting a fervent clamor even if only as a fleeting glimmer, illuminating the dim world of the cradle. This spectacle led Li Wenyuan to ponder whether they were truly so obstinate that they required humanity to provide an explanation before conceding. However, upon gazing at the leader, Li Wenyuan's countenance shifted to one of astonishment. Though his actions were rife with madness and his voice lured with persuasion, his expression remained remarkably composed, devoid of the anticipated frenzy. Turning his attention to the throng, Li Wenyuan noted that despite their fervor, their eyes bore an unprecedented calmness, even tinged with a hue of serenity. They were acutely aware, cognizant of both truth and reality. Yet, as civilization had progressed to this day, the enduring and resolute cohesion had seeped into the very blood of each individual. Even if they were mistaken, they would never concede. Upon hearing their leader's proclamation, a silent understanding blossomed among the people, who, after exchanging gestures, settled in place, encircling one another in countless formations. In that moment, they seemed to revert to primordial times, a gathering of souls deliberating the nature of the colossal, celestial bodies above. The leader of the annihilators then produced a peculiar device, resembling a tube encased in a helical structure. This was the suicide device that governed the lives of them all. Once activated, their genes would collapse in unison, resulting in instant demise. This scene appears eerily familiar. An inexplicable premonition compelled the leader of the civilization annihilators to gaze skyward, traversing countless vast stars, until his eyes met those of the leader of the Ember Alliance, who was also inexplicably looking up. Though they did not exchange glances, it felt as if they stood face to face. We are the harbingers of civilization's destruction. Those who observe us are but remnants of a bygone era. This path remains untraveled, and we shall personally ascertain what truth lies at its end. As the device activated, the genetic structure of all primary species among the civilization annihilators collapsed simultaneously. This agony bore no consequence. They continued to sit together, gazing at one another, until they dissolved into a pool of organic murk. At the moment of consciousness fading, they seemed to genuinely return to the past, clad in primitive garb, gazing at the sky with newfound curiosity. Meanwhile, the universe continued its ordinary course, just as it always had. End of chapter 158. Post-war galaxy purpose and deception. Greed and desire. These are the most common occurrences in the galaxy. Great endeavors ultimately arise only within a select few. Heralds of the apocalypse. If you were to witness this scene, would you regret your past actions? As Li Wenyuan recalled the words he had once heard from the Wanderers, he witnessed the curtain fall on the last lost empire that existed before his arrival. All lost empires seem to toil for a grand cause. Yet, as they say, purpose and deception, greed and desire are the most prevalent themes. How could a great endeavor, saturated with these elements, ever succeed? Though the civilization annihilators spoke with an air of righteousness, their grand enterprise was rife with indifference, deceit, and arrogance. Driven by their ambition to achieve greatness, they recklessly dragged the entire galaxy into an irreversible experiment. Should they succeed, they would indeed merit the title of greatness. However, what if they fail? They crafted a logical loop without grasping the situation and clung to it with unwavering conviction, blissfully unaware of their initial errors. This was the root of their downfall. No matter how resplendent they once were, the civilization annihilators now stand as mere failures in the annals of history. Their legacy will soon vanish without a trace under the might of time, and the civilization annihilators will become synonymous with the past. Thus, the crisis in the galaxy concludes. In their final moments, the civilization annihilators chose collective self-destruction, preserving the integrity of the Gaia planets they had altered. According to reports from Pressoran, the cordyceps disease had been contained within a single star system, eliminating the possibility of further spread. The Queen of Pressoran excitedly informed him that they had discovered the cordyceps fungi capable of rejuvenating deceased organisms, and they intended to name that star system farmland, designating it as a grain-producing system. In this regard, Li Wenyuan expressed no dissent, merely advising her to implement robust leak prevention measures to avert the resurgence of the cordyceps fungus. The wanderers, who had sought refuge, systematically returned to their respective civilizations. Although the galaxy appeared somewhat dilapidated in the aftermath of the crisis, each individual brimmed with hope and vigor, diligently striving to restore the former splendor. They brought with them accounts from within the realms of the fallen empires and speculations regarding the relationships among the remaining few. This marked the first genuine incursion of these individuals into the domain of the coordinators, where they discovered a setting seemingly ensconced in a remote, isolated star cluster. Concurrently, they reaffirmed the connection between the Guardians and the coordinators, as evidenced by the identical appearance of the robotic entities and the nearly indistinguishable architectural styles, leading them to ponder whether these two fallen empires were merely divergent expressions of a singular civilization. The hatching grounds of Pressolan remained as hospitable as ever, generously bestowing the extraordinary gift of air-dried cordyceps fungus and marinated, aged space whale meat, which they proudly dubbed a galactic delicacy. However, for those who felt nauseated at the mere sight of the fungus, this offering was politely declined, evoking a sense of regret from Pressolan. Meanwhile, the returnees from the newly awakened realm brought back an advanced robotic aid, seemingly poised to offer significant assistance to the scientists, who have already commenced its development. While reconstruction was paramount, plans for future advancements were also underway. This sophisticated robotic aid promised to enhance the research efficiency of the scientists, heralding a promising future. It was nearly time to return. Li Wenyuan remarked on the remarkable performance of the galactic civilizations, noting their progress. He then commanded the fleet to return to the national borders while he piloted a research vessel to the refuge world. Although its name and perceived function closely resembled that of his own sanctuary world, this location was, in fact, a prison for civilizations subjugated by the civilization annihilators. True to their ominous moniker, these annihilators obliterated these civilizations the moment they chose to end their own lives. However, these civilizations had long been extinguished. The spores employed by the annihilators to control the populace had eradicated the host's consciousness upon parasitism, leaving behind mere living shells. In their quest for authenticity and liberation from the virtual realm, they had ushered these living shells towards death alongside them. Li Wenyuan had intended to ascertain whether any other living souls remained within this sanctuary, only to encounter an unexpected group. His awareness stirred slightly, prompting him to review the ongoing galactic war reports. The individuals who had arrived were a long-lost faction that had mysteriously vanished some time ago. Li Wenyuan had previously encountered them when they accosted him for money, dubbing them beggars, initially believing them to have perished in a previous crisis. He was astonished to find that, after enduring the Heaven War, the Ring Crisis, the Breakers, the Cordyceps disease, and the Civilization Annihilators, they were still very much alive. Moreover, from the perspective of their organizational scale and level of order, they have evidently evolved to a state of civilization, starkly contrasting their previous existence of mere survival through begging. Indeed, they were once the Compraller Raiders, a group akin to space pirates, yet leading a wretched life of dependency. However, they now appear remarkably transformed. They have also recognized the arrival of Li Wenyuan. Yet in comparison to a long-extinct, arrogant awakening empire, they exhibit a commendable humility. They were the first to signal that they posed no threat and steered clear of the ring world. Subsequently, they continued to communicate with Li Wenyuan, esteemed guardian, greetings. We are the interstellar warriors under the command of the Khan. We understand that you possess omniscient knowledge, yet we feel compelled to elucidate our actions. We are not desecrating the dead. Rather, we have come to rescue survivors who are under the control of the civilization annihilators. The leaders of these civilizations are not foolish. They recognize the perilous nature of relinquishing their citizens' lives to another civilization. Consequently, certain individuals among them have initiated a special Ember plan. They entered into a pact with the weave of life within the virtual realm, ensuring that a portion of their populace possesses extraordinary vitality, albeit at the cost of weakening the life force of others. Through this contract, these individuals endured the spore parasitism and successfully deceived the civilization annihilators, evading death. However, as no one has paid the price, those who survived will soon perish, and that is the purpose of our arrival. As they spoke, these interstellar warriors transmitted a plethora of instant video files. Li Wenyuan witnessed countless frail individuals being extracted from a mountain of corpses, connected to 4 drips to sustain their vitality, and hurriedly transported aboard their ships. To dispel any doubts, the warriors did not cease their explanations. Our Khan is an immensely powerful psion, who has uncovered certain flaws within the virtual realm contract and discovered a method to save these lives. We have entered into a pact with another entity within the virtual realm, employing a strategy akin to robbing Peter to pay Paul to counteract the effects of the weave of life. Although it is arduous, this is the sole means we have found. As long as we endure until the contract concludes, these lives can be rejuvenated. This is a trial belonging to our great Khan. If you consent, might you refrain from intervening in the course of this trial? We swear upon our honor and lives that, even if we perish, these lives shall remain unharmed. Li Wenyuan observed their method. They offered their own flesh to these weakened souls. Although it appeared absurd, it remarkably revived the vitality of the dying individuals. In response, Li Wenyuan did not intervene. While he could attempt to communicate with the weave of life within the virtual realm to disrupt this contract, by the time he did so, these individuals might already be lost, and besides, he might not even be able to locate it. After thoroughly inspecting the refuge in the Rim world and finding no anomalies, he departed from the site. He harbored a modicum of interest in those who claimed to be under the command of the Khan. Yet it appeared that the Khan had yet to emerge in the cosmos, still undergoing trials. These reformed individuals seemed to represent a force that could not be overlooked. Perhaps the galactic civilizations ought to pay them greater heed. Nevertheless, to him, they remained akin to children in kindergarten, merely a part of the vast tapestry of galactic civilization. Upon his departure, these interstellar warriors under the Khan intensified their efforts to assist survivors, as waves of spacecraft traversed to and fro until all survivors had been accounted for. The area was strewn with corpses. However, these warriors did not allow them to rot unceremoniously in the wilderness. Instead, they conducted simple funerals to honor all lives lost during this galactic crisis. It was not until some time later that the ships of the Spark Alliance arrived in haste, only to be astonished to discover that someone had already tended to the spirits of the departed. They endeavored to locate this civilization within the galaxy, but found no trace. Not a single civilization took responsibility for this event, which would have significantly bolstered diplomatic reputations. Ultimately, the Spark Alliance convened at a colossal architectural structure, the newly reconstructed headquarters of the Star Sea community, to report their findings. Thus, the galaxy turned a new page. Countless participants had taken their leave. Yet new dancers would continue to grace the stage, ensuring the galaxy's performance never waned. End of chapter 159. The gift of the Guardian. The galaxy had just emerged from a crisis. Yet the process of rebuilding that followed was a necessary phase for burgeoning civilizations. Time shifted slightly back to shortly after the resolution of the Civilization Annihilator. The Star Sea Community, an interstellar organization, had lost its headquarters, a massive space station located in the Triad star system, due to the assault by the Civilization Annihilator. To say it was lost is somewhat misleading. In truth, the space station had been shrouded by the annihilation weapon known as the Seraph, deployed by the Titan, effectively severing all internal and external detection. When the Civilization Annihilator was still an observer, it had previously employed such a weapon to confine a group of xenophobic races to a single planet, holding them captive until, after an indeterminate period, a hapless individual inadvertently released them when the barrier weakened. Now, it was the turn of galactic civilizations to experience such an ordeal. The shielded space station had now become the site of the former headquarters of the Star Sea community, a landmark reflecting the galaxy's trials with the Cordyceps plague and the Civilization Annihilator crisis, attracting a steady stream of visitors. Fortunately, no one had been trapped within the station. Had there been, that individual might have been recorded in the Star Sea world records as the loneliest person in the galaxy. Although the symbolic edifice in the Triad star system was lost, the survival of our civilization through the crisis was the greatest fortune of all. A representative of the civilization mused as he tended to the communications documents in his hands. He is currently engaged in the formidable task of reconstructing the headquarters of the Star Sea community, alongside representatives from various civilizations and architectural robots, on a rather ordinary habitable planet. The hastily assembled temporary headquarters possesses a certain rustic charm, yet, on the contrary, it resembles a dilapidated dwelling unfit even for primitive beings. Only the essential electronic facilities retain a semblance of advanced technology. The rest, akin to makeshift offices, resemble true huts, vulnerable to the autumn winds. Were it not for the representatives' fundamental genetic modifications, endowing them with significant environmental adaptability, they would find it challenging to shoulder such responsibilities. Despite their lamentations, they have grown unaccustomed to this primitive lifestyle, having been surrounded by high technology for so long. One representative murmured, lifting an integrated desk crafted from alloy, intending to place it within his humble abode. The current galactic civilization is in a state of resource scarcity following the war, leaving little energy to assist the Star Sea community. The materials they possess are cobbled together from various civilizations, and even this constitutes a substantial aid. Alas, the hardships of post-war days are upon us, someone sighed. Just then, they noticed the communicator designed for receiving critical information flashing a red light. Not only that, but the communicators of other representatives exhibited the same phenomenon. Typically, this indicates that significant events are unfolding within the galaxy. Is this true? We have only just achieved peace. Could another crisis be looming? Some appeared quite distressed, pondering how they could endure yet another impending calamity. However, as they activated their communicators, their expressions evolved from grave and pessimistic to one of astonishment, followed by an uncontrollable surge of excitement. Could this be a case of emerging from great peril to find fortune? They received a communication from the Guardians, a message of goodwill. The enigmatic mechanical Lost Empire, which resolved the galactic crisis, continues to maintain its elusive demeanor. Nevertheless, the various civilizations, having endured so much, have come to grasp, at least to some extent, the Guardian state of being. This unique Lost Empire refrains from interfering in any galactic processes, but possesses a distinctive logic for safeguarding the overall integrity of galactic civilization from severe devastation. When the Ring Crisis erupted, they were the first to respond, eliminating the threat before the galactic civilizations even had time to react. At that time, the galactic civilizations were entirely unaware of the Guardians' motives, with some speculating whether the mechanical Lost Empire harbored ancient grievances against the Void. Conversely, when the crisis of the World Breakers emerged, the Guardians did not intervene. Some, belatedly, surmised that the Guardians seemed to understand that these World Breakers were not here for the annihilation of the galaxy. This contrasting attitude during crises has led the galactic civilizations to subtly perceive the operational logic of the Guardians. It was only after the emergence of the cordyceps disease and the civilization annihilators that they began to feel a gradual understanding of the entire situation. During the cordyceps outbreak, the Guardians refrained from intervening, seemingly confident in the galactic civilization's ability to withstand this crisis independently. Indeed, even in the absence of Pressoran, armed with their increasingly proficient weaponry, the matter disassembler, they would eventually eradicate the cordyceps plague. However, against the civilization annihilator, an awakened empire, they found themselves utterly powerless. It seemed that the Guardians only opted to act after confirming the civilization annihilator as a galactic threat. Presently, the Guardians have been affectionately labeled as the protectors of the galaxy by its civilizations. At least those who have endured the galactic crisis express their heartfelt gratitude towards this lost empire. They harbor no resentment or demand for earlier assistance, recognizing that as interstellar civilizations, they must rely on their own capabilities. Others are not obligated to shoulder their burdens during the crisis. Any protection offered was a matter of goodwill, while their own fortification is their true responsibility. Consequently, following the resolution of the crisis, they sent messages of thanks to the Guardians, subsequently commencing their own reconstruction efforts. Although they held no expectation for a response from the Guardians, upon receiving their gifts, tears of joy brimmed in their eyes, as if their efforts had not been in vain. Galactic announcement. Threat neutralized. Shelters will return to a closed state. Guardian protocols in effect. Please prepare to receive assistance. The following civilizations, organizations, or groups. Civilizations: Spark Alliance, Starry Alliance. Mingbo Technocratic Dictatorship, Underworld Forest Kingdom. Organizations or groups: Starsea Community, Space Amoeba Rescue Agency. Curators Organization Trialist Con. Note: assistance will be delivered within 15 galactic days. Please utilize it wisely. Guardians, my deity, my love, my ideal, my everything. Some could not help but recite clumsy verses. Ordinarily, such a display might invite laughter. Yet in this moment, they were all enveloped in similar sentiments. Nothing could surpass the feeling of being the recipient of timely aid. Though they were uncertain of the specifics of the Guardians' offerings, what could possibly be inadequate from the hands of a mechanical lost empire? Is this the essence of being cherished? Even my father never loved me so dearly. Another representative, deeply scarred by a family of gamblers, was moved to tears. His civilization bore the brunt of the crisis first. And even now, their homeworld was borrowed from the Spark Alliance. He had thought warmth could only emanate from organic beings. Yet now he found himself feeling valued and cared for by these cold, sentient machines, a notion he had never contemplated. It is decided. Should anyone dare to speak ill of the Guardians, I shall be the first to strike. Well said. I propose we establish a cult of the Guardians to spread their gospel. These jubilant individuals began to celebrate exuberantly while speculating about the gifts the Guardians would bestow upon the Starsea community. After all, they were to work here and did not wish to remain in such a state indefinitely. Ultimately, they awaited news with bated breath. A colossal architectural marvel, constructed at an indeterminate time in a certain tri-star system, is poised to become the new headquarters of the interstellar community. They had never envisioned that one day such a monumental edifice would serve as the heart of their organization. This multifunctional giant conference hall would likely never be filled to capacity during their limited lifetimes. Thus, their anticipation grew for the gifts bestowed by the Guardians to the galactic civilizations. Chapter 160. The Spark Rekindled. My good brother, how have you fared of late? Look who has arrived. I just prepared an energizing beverage. Allow me to offer you a cup. No need for formality. How many times must I reiterate that those drones are intended for the depths of the ocean? We cannot delay. Guests have arrived. Let us discuss your role as a representative of the Spark Alliance later, shall we? I have awaited your arrival for quite some time. A representative from the Spark Alliance, newly arrived at the headquarters of the interstellar community, found himself bewildered by the enthusiastic crowd around him, uncertain about the unfolding events. He held a warm, functional drink in his hands, adorned with local specialties from various civilizations at his waist, and a well-trained mollusk nestled on his shoulder, affectionately nuzzling his cheek. With the interstellar community having received the Guardian's gift of this grand assembly hall as their headquarters, the Galactic Conference, which had been in a state of stagnation, was reignited. As a member of the Galactic civilizations, the Spark Alliance naturally participated in this revival. However, from the moment his spacecraft docked and he disembarked, he sensed a palpable shift in the gazes directed at him. Historically, the Spark Alliance had been quite vocal in its criticisms of other civilizations, resulting in a lack of cordiality. The reactions he typically encountered ranged from indifference to outright disdain. Yet now, amidst the warm words of welcome, he perceived kindness, friendship, and even a hint of flattery. What had transpired? Before he could grasp the situation, he was swept into the conference hall by the throng, inexplicably thrust into the meeting. Ahem. Silence, please. Although several representatives have yet to arrive, we cannot delay much longer. I hereby declare the first post-war summary meeting to commence. Accompanied by a chorus of scattered applause, a series of data sheets materialized before each representative. While the primary function of the Interstellar Assembly is merely to gather individuals for discussion, the technological sophistication of this monumental venue is not to be underestimated. Many civilizations, which had previously never attended in person, were now represented once more. The interstellar community rejoiced at this development, though the true motives behind this resurgence were of little concern to them. As the data sheets flickered, a lengthy congratulatory message appeared, commending the galaxy for enduring the recent crisis with minimal absences. Following this, gratitude was expressed towards several fallen empires for their remarkable contributions during this tumultuous period. Although it remained uncertain whether these lost empires were observing, the formalities had to be observed. Finally, the introduction of every attendee commenced, with several representatives of formidable civilizations adorned with numerous honorary prefixes. Such formalities are universally disliked. Everyone understands this, yet they have become an inescapable part of the customary process. As the representative of the Flame Alliance listened to this verbose discourse, he inwardly lamented, "It is imperative to propose a topic that bans such pernicious practices." The interminable speeches, reminiscent of a cacophony, eventually came to a close, and the ever-changing data on the screen swiftly roused the drowsy representatives to attention. The previously somber atmosphere shifted to one of gravity. Every expression turned solemn. Even the faceless representative of the fungal civilization displayed a serious countenance through their electronic screen. This time, with some civilizations forever departed from us, the statistics of the fallen and missing in this crisis continued to rise, a number that was tragically significant. Regrettably, they could not witness the dawn of a new day under the stars. All that remains for us is to remember them and press onward. A profound silence enveloped the gathering. No words were spoken as each individual collectively engaged in a moment of mourning. This was the only act that the living could perform for the deceased, and while the gathering observed this solemn tribute, they would later honor the fallen according to their respective customs. The tradition of the Flame Alliance is a space funeral, wherein they meticulously construct a coffin ship to carry the bodies of the fallen, destined for the unpredictable void of the cosmos. As an interstellar civilization, their motto is to meet death amongst the stars. They also conduct such ceremonies for the extinct indigenous peoples, wishing to impart a sense of cosmic warmth to those civilizations that perished before they could ever touch the heavens. The serious atmosphere lingered within the venue for some time before it began to dissipate. Behind the string of numbers lay the countless sacrifices of those who contributed to the continuity of civilization. Expansion is but a facet of the civilizational journey, while remembrance of the past serves as the core method to maintain a straight path. In the aftermath of this crisis, the cohesion among each civilization experienced an unprecedented enhancement. Their foundations have become remarkably solid, and perhaps in the future, we shall witness their resplendent resurgence. Thus, we now transition to the next segment. The organizer at the center of the venue activated the apparatus, finally unveiling the interface laden with agenda topics. The solemnity of the atmosphere transformed into a more relaxed demeanor, as the representatives understood that the true confrontation was about to commence. The first item on the agenda was the establishment of the Star Sea Council, a topic interrupted by the crisis. The representative of the Flame Alliance showed little interest in this matter, having already sold their voting rights on this issue to other civilizations at an agreeable price. Now, he pondered when to elevate the Space Shapeshifter Protection Act to the forefront. The matter at hand had long reached a conclusion. It was merely a matter of announcement now. Upon hearing this statement, the representative of the Spark Alliance felt a twinge of confusion. When did this transpire? I recall that we were still one position short. Could it be that we overlooked a crucial meeting? He inquired of the other representatives nearby, only to be met with inscrutable expressions, deepening his bewilderment. It was not until he heard the mention of the Spark Alliance and witnessed the eager gazes of his fellow representatives that realization dawned upon him. His attention was drawn to the central display, showcasing the list of the Starry Sea Council. Among the names, the Stellar Alliance, the Conqueror Empire, and the Servants of Paradise were prominently featured, while the Spark Alliance appeared somewhat out of place. This cannot be right. He was at a loss as to how their civilization, ranked second to last in the Galactic Civilization Power Index, could secure such a position. Yet the affirming glances from those around him seemed to convey an unspoken truth. After stammering through a series of expressions of gratitude and honor, he felt a sense of dizziness, utterly perplexed by the turn of events. Little did he know, What they regarded as a matter of course was viewed as a bold and commendable act by other civilizations, garnering the approval of the vast majority. The contributions of the Spark Alliance amidst this crisis were clearly evident. If there were to be any accolades, they would undoubtedly be deemed great champions in the battle against adversity. Perhaps from the moment their leader delivered a stirring speech, offering habitable planets to shelter the displaced, and grasping the planetary bomb detonator, the barriers had begun to dissolve. What now resided in the galaxy was not a wavering spark of weakness, but a rekindled flame of hope. Chapter 161. The Khan's trial. When the representative of the Spark Alliance returned from the Starry Sea Community headquarters, he was still in a daze, completely unaware of how they had inexplicably secured the final seat on the Starry Sea Council. At that moment, the Spark Alliance was equally oblivious, awaiting his news with bated breath. Though some expressed concern for his well-being upon his return, no one anticipated the momentous news he bore. Thus, when he proclaimed that they had become one of the 4 ordinary civilizations standing at the pinnacle of galactic diplomatic power, the immediate reaction from all was one of incredulity. However, he indeed brought forth evidence. The appointment documents from the Starry Sea Council had been issued, and they were now among the few civilizations wielding significant diplomatic influence, necessitating their deeper involvement in interstellar society. This was truly an unforeseen development. I always believed our misfortune would not last indefinitely, reflected the elation of the Spark Alliance's leader. With this newfound power, they might accomplish feats previously deemed impossible. While the galactic civilization continued to speak through strength, the diplomatic reputation of the Spark Alliance compensated for their inadequacies in power. They have now commenced planning to present several proposals, once deemed hopeless, in the upcoming meeting to gauge the reaction of the galactic civilizations. Although the galaxy remains mired in the desolation of post-war recovery, the contemplation of future endeavors has never ceased. On another note, you have reported to the community about that enigmatic organization we discovered in the refuge ring world, have you not? What was their response? The leader inquired about this matter. The organization that conducted funerals for the deceased, ensuring they were not left to decay in the wilderness, has significantly endeared themselves to them. However, it seems that there have been no rumors of this organization throughout the galaxy, prompting him to seek potential leads through the Starsea community. The representative attending the meeting did not disappoint his expectations. This issue has garnered some attention, although the vast majority of civilizations remain unaware, fortuitously. The curator has made some discoveries. As he spoke, the representative produced a document densely packed with recorded text. This was a record of communications with the curator during the fungal blight. Although it seems inappropriate to sell customer information, after the Starsea community intervened and bore certain costs, we acquired this information. The curator, demonstrating a degree of professional ethics, only provided records of communications conducted under the auspices of the Starsea community, from which one notable point emerged. The curator is an advisory organization within the galaxy, engaged in the trade of various knowledge, and even their own scientists. Their species possesses an extraordinary intellect, an innate wisdom seemingly derived from their genes and lineage, which sets their scientists leagues ahead of others. To quantify this, if a newly ascendant civilization scientists are at level 1, the curator scientists start at level 5. Perhaps the curators were once a civilization themselves. But after enduring the passage of eons, they ultimately did not evolve into a lost empire. Instead, they transformed into an interstellar organization dedicated to the collection, preservation, and sale of knowledge. This presents a conundrum within the galaxy. Why has this seemingly omniscient curator not ascended further? Rumors abound regarding this organization, which indeed boasts a rich history, frequently engaging in the exchange of knowledge and intelligence with various civilizations. During the fungal blight, their threshold was trampled upon. Although the curator faced limited solutions to this artificial crisis, having even lost a branch space station to the blight, many still sought to trade with them for methods to combat it. The curator provided some unique insights, notably that the missiles with devastating effects against the fungi were initially supplied by them. Among the civilizations engaged in negotiations with the curator, while the vast majority appeared quite ordinary, the expression of this worker, who had returned from the Starsea community, seemed rather peculiar, as if grappling with the intricacies of the matter at hand. Among them was a civilization that had long since perished, raising the question, a deceased civilization? The leader's expression momentarily faltered before he began to enumerate. Was it the group annihilated by the civilization exterminators? But would they have sought the curator at that time? No, it was not that group, but rather the Grand Dan Cam civilization that was obliterated during the Ring Crisis. Upon the utterance of this statement, the atmosphere appeared to freeze momentarily. The representative had reported solely to the leader upon their return, so only the two of them were present at that moment. However, the ambience shifted for an instant. Though the situation was indeed extraordinary, it was conceivable that survivors of the Dan Cam civilization might still exist. Or perhaps someone had appropriated their name. What circumstances could possibly necessitate the invocation of a long-extinct civilization's identity? It was undeniably perplexing. Clearly, this matter warranted greater scrutiny. The leader understood that there could not be merely this solitary piece of information. There must be other significant aspects to attend to. As anticipated, the representative subsequently began to recount the affairs concerning the Dan Cam civilization and the curator. This civilization or organization, known as DanCam, posed a multitude of inquiries, diverse in nature, even including matters as trivial as the number of lost empires within the galaxy, facts that even children knew. The nature of their questions suggested that they bore little resemblance to the former DanCam, appearing instead as a civilization striving to reacquaint itself with the galaxy. Although I had speculated whether the embers of DanCam had rekindled their nation, the time elapsed since the Ring Crisis was insufficient to obliterate historical memory. According to certain statements from the curator, the civilization that had borrowed the name of DanCam seemed to be embroiled in internal strife, with several leaders vying to determine the ultimate victor through trials. As the exposition progressed, the leader of the Ember Alliance comprehended that an unknown civilization was entangled in an internal power struggle, giving rise to multiple factional organizations. The scene they had witnessed in the refuge world appeared to be a trial task of one such faction, perhaps not as noble as they had initially presumed. However, irrespective of their motives, their actions in this instance merited commendation. Thus, the leader of the Ember Alliance contemplated and convened a meeting. They were now a member of